Uh-oh.
Well, we've actually been muted this entire time. Jiminy Christmas. Shall we start that over? Should we just go ahead and do that?
Yeah, probably.
I am so sorry about that, guys.
God.
Like, pardon my dust when it comes. I'm really trying to get everything to work on the streaming device or on the streaming software, and it's back and forth.
It's okay.
And by the way, thank you for other Drak for that's probably my wife, who's just like, we can't hear you for anything.
Is he?
You've just been sitting here for.
Yeah, I'll just need to make sure to bring sock puppets the next time this happens. Like, oh, we're muted.
Yeah.
It's like time for the sock puppets.
Pretty much.
Let's entertain them while we start over.
All right, so welcome everybody to the Why We Geek Podcast, the podcast where we talk about, or we take a piece of geek culture, we dissect it, we analyze it, we show why we love it, and tonight we have an amazing piece of subject matter to be able to get into, a pillar of anime. And with me, I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce my panel of fellow geeks, fellow content creators, fellow fans. Let's go ahead and start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, Rhapsody in Cinema, Martial March. This is appropriate that we're talking about this with Martial March. Stephen Romney, how you doing?
Well, doing pretty good, especially now that I get another take at my own intro. So,
yay!
It's,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's been a busy day, but can't really complain. Pretty productive, and it's nice that we're actually getting some really, really nice weather.
Exactly. And then also joining us, and this seems really appropriate considering the conversations that we've been able to have outside of this podcast, but once again, rejoining guest, Shay Taree. Shay, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing really good. Can't complain too much.
Aside from the whole muting thing. I swear,
Yeah, but
every
it's
time I do a
okay.
live stream, there's one hiccup. There's one.
It's okay. I heard you're not a real streamer if you haven't done an entire
Exactly.
streaming without mute being on.
And you feel bad about it. Like the one that actually made me feel bad about a couple of weeks ago when we started streaming actively, and I got endless crap for it. I'm still getting crap for it. Was me and my wife were streaming WoW together and just having some really good conversations, and I didn't realize that on the soundboard her mic was muted, but mine wasn't. And so at that point, I mean, thankfully people could hear her. Like, they could hear her through my mic because we were, about that far apart. But there's literal moments where she is straight quiet because she's talking directly into her mic. And it's not working out so well. So I got endless amounts of, well, what? Did you banish your wife to the kitchen permanently for the entire live stream? Did she go and make you a sandwich? Yeah.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, that's when he feels like, well, she made me a sandwich, a knuckle sandwich, when she realized her mic was muted.
Oh no, she's the one giving me the crap. She's the one giving me the crap. She's just like, am I muted this time? No, honey, you're not muted this time.
That's only right.
No,
But she gives you the most crap.
I'd rather have her do it than some of the people who follow the podcast. I'm just saying. So. Anyway, tonight we have an interesting bit of subject matter. Tonight we're going to be talking a staple, a pillar of the anime genre. And in fact, if you haven't seen this at least once, I don't know if you can actually claim to be an anime fan. At least at one point. I'm not saying that it defines your fandom, but you have to have at least a little bit of exposure to this, and that is Dragonball. As we just barely pointed out, or at least Romney did while we were on mute, we're actually doing this, 2 days after Goku Day?
Yep. May 9th is Goku Day in Japan. And it's not even like a colloquial holiday. Like, the Japanese government officially sanctioned May 9th as Goku Day.
So it's basically our equivalent of, May the 4th.
Yep. And
wow.
Except it's like the equivalent, except it's an official Japanese holiday, whereas May the 4th isn't recognized as an official holiday by our government. In Japan, it's like an actual declared holiday, and it's also oddly fitting considering that Goku is actually the mascot for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo next year.
Is he really?
Yeah, They announced way back when that Goku is the official mascot for the 2020 Summer Games.
That's actually pretty dope.
Yeah, in my entire lifetime, it's
that.
always been invented mascots that have happened for things like the World Cup or for the Olympics. It's never been somebody who's established before.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very interesting.
It's fitting, though, considering Goku is all about, striving to make your body kind of, trying to be that better version of yourself than you were yesterday, constantly training, working hard. I mean, that's what Olympians do. So it fits. It fits.
It really does. But really quick, before we start getting into the questions that we usually do for Why We Geek, I should probably clarify something really quick. Dragon Ball has a huge reach. All right. Mm-hmm. It reaches into gaming. It reaches into, obviously, manga, because that's where Akira Toriyama started with it. It reaches into, as we were talking about, but you guys couldn't officially hear, we were, dropping some mad heat on Dragon Ball Evolution. It has reached mainstream films. It's reached out into the ether in multiple directions. And so basically what this episode is going to be is celebrating all of it. I'm not necessarily going to restrict us to, only the good Dragon Ball series or only the good Dragon Ball games. It's one of the things I've kind of realized as a Dragon Ball fan and talking to fellow Dragon Ball fans is that changes very frequently. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm just barely coming to the knowledge of major workout gurus who are hardcore Dragon Ball fans. And that's why they got into health sciences and things like that. It's actually kind of amazing to me in a way.
Yeah, like you have health gurus, workout gurus, even professional athletes. I know Ronda Rousey's gone on record saying she's a fan of Dragon Ball as well.
Oh, so. No, she's an avid Vegeta fan. She's gone on record for that. The one that blew my mind was some of the, because people will also know I do a pro wrestling podcast. There are some people from like the 70s and 80s of wrestling who know who Goku is. They don't necessarily watch, but they know the name Goku.
Yeah. And it's especially telling when you consider how the internet freaked out back when Black Panther was in theaters, how Michael B. Jordan was being public about how he was a major anime fan as well.
Yeah, he loves, I think, what was it? He likes Naruto, Dragon Ball Z. He likes a lot of different shows.
Yeah.
And also...
And this reveal to you guys was basically the equivalent of when I found out that Vin Diesel was a hardcore D&D nut.
Yep. And my favorite from that time...
That was my favorite.
Yeah, my favorite from when the internet was blowing up about it is like someone just like, hey, they should make Space Jam, but put Michael B. Jordan in instead of Looney Tunes, have it be anime.
It's too bad LeBron has that.
Honestly, LeBron can have the Looney Tunes. Honestly, I've tried designing actual posters to see what that would look like if you got Michael B. Jordan to basically do the Space Jam thing with anime characters. I can see it working. I'd
be okay with it, just because I haven't really seen a role that Michael B. Jordan hasn't done well in. I mean, for crying out loud, he's like the one, and I think you and I have had debates on this, Romney, but like to me, he is the one positive thing out of Fan 4 Stick. The one.
Yeah, but then there are also, much better films. I mean, obviously there's Killmonger, but then there's also the Creed movies.
Which I'm very excited to get to myself.
Yeah. Also, Fruitvale Station was a good one, too.
Yeah, Fruitvale Station. That was what put him on the map.
Yeah.
I remember even watching an episode of, I think it was Without a Trace, where it was like a really young Michael B. Jordan, and I just look at that, I'm just like, wow, he's really young in this episode.
He's also in Hardball, like that movie with Keanu Reeves when he trains the baseball team. Yeah. Another person whom I actually was really shocked really likes Dragon Ball Z was actually Chris Brown. Like, he's a huge DBZ fan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know that until like he was putting out so much stuff on like his Instagram, and I was like, "Is that DBZ?" And I'm like, "What?" Like,
dude, it'd blow your mind. Like, a majority of the rap community are all fans.
They love DBZ.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of hip-hop artists, like even underground artists, that you'll find references to Dragon Ball Z in a number of different songs.
I mean,
remember there was a video like...
Correct me if I'm wrong, Romney. I've only heard tell of this, but Snoop Dogg apparently has, like... Because he has those hustler jackets, like... crap, what's this bucket that runs Playboy? Like, he has... But one of them has a Roshi insignia on it. It's, like, straight orange. Like, it's orange silk, and it has the Roshi... mark on it.
I can't really confirm it, but honestly, it wouldn't really surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either.
And to me, like he's the old fart of rap. Like everybody knows who he is. So
to me, it's just surprising. It's just so surprising because, like, obviously, in like the African American community, like liking anime is like unheard of. So to have Dragon Ball Z like push through that barrier, good job, Dragon Ball. Good job.
But you want to know what's amazing about that too? It actually makes sense considering some of the subject matter we're going to be talking about today. as one of the first anime films that actually did really, really, really well is a Dragon Ball film. And that's going to be something that's going to be in the record books from here on in. But without further ado, let's get into the meat of this by first of all stating a popular question on the podcast is your first ever moment being exposed to Dragon Ball. It doesn't really matter what series or anything like that. I'm pretty sure that all of us will have the exact same series in mind, but as a coupling to that is like, after that first moment, what was the moment that made you continue on into Dragon Ball? What was the moment that made you a Dragon Ball fan? Just to give an example for me, I've kind of told this story on a number of podcasts that Shay's been on, as well as Romney, and I'm probably going to have to tell it again, is that I didn't have a whole lot of exposure. The most exposure I had was that it was shown on UPN at like 5 a.m., and it was scattered episodes. Literally, you could go from one episode, like, you could go to the episode where Vegeta's facing Zarbon, and then the next week, they decided to take the movie Tree of Might and make it episodes, and then at that point, you'd get an episode of the Tree of Might movie, and then the next week, you get Cell Games. And so it's like, I have no idea what's going on here. So that's my first exposure to Dragon Ball is that. What made me a fan, however, because, again, I couldn't really keep the plot straight, was eventually when I got access to Cartoon Network. And unfortunately at that point, because I have a feeling Romney's going to smack me, but at that point, they were running the Buu Saga. And they were in the middle of it. Okay, so at this point, Goku had gone Super Saiyan 3, and I think Super Buu had happened. And so at that point, like, Gotenks was a thing at that moment when I started watching, and I just decided, you know what, I've always wanted to be able to see pieces of this, and the episode that I started watching was when Gohan stepped into the fray as, I guess, the term that we call him for that is Mystic Gohan, and him taking on Super Buu. And from there on in, I finished the Buu Saga. Like, I was hooked, I wanted to know more. I then was able to get my hands on the Frieza Saga and pieces of Cell. But as time went on, I eventually saw all of Z. I eventually went back to the original Dragon Ball. And I went to GT, and I've gone to Super, and all of that. And that's the moment. It's appropriate, considering other things we'll talk about today. Gohan is why I am a Dragon Ball fan, not Goku. But that's mine. Romney, what was your first exposure to Dragon Ball? And also, what was the moment that made you a fan?
Well, there's a lot to kind of explain here. I mean, first of all, I never had cable growing up, so I didn't get to see I didn't have access to Cartoon Network, Toonami, or any of that. Honestly, like, thinking back, my first, like, absolute first memory is that what first caught my attention when I first heard about the franchise was starting to see some of the toys that were available in toy stores. I thought, oh, hey, these characters look kind of cool. And then I remember it's faint, but what I remember is that it started when I was at my local library, because my family had this thing where every Friday after we were all out of school, my mom would take us to a library where it's like, oh, hey, we can check out books or check out a movie to watch at the house. And we each got to pick up one thing because we each had our own library card. And on a whim, this VHS tape caught my attention. And it was from a segment in the Namek Saga. But what caught my attention was that, like, oh, it's this thing called Death of a Prince. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but the cover caught my attention. And so I checked it out, and we brought it home. And it was the episode of the Namek Saga where Frieza first, like, the recap starts with how Frieza kills Dende. And the episode is the episode where Frieza then kills Vegeta while Goku is healing after his fight with the Ginyu Force. And so that was kind of where it started. And naturally, because back then, when me and my siblings, when we all lived at the same house, whenever we got any anime, we would always kind of sit around and watch it. My eldest sister was the eldest of all of us, so she would screen everything that we would check out. And so from there, we always gathered around to watch it, and after we watched that tape, we're just like, hey, let's find more of these. Let's kind of watch as much as we can. So we would scour this library. We would place holds in the library system, finding as many of these VHS tapes as we could find. Some of them were the TV edits. Some of them were uncut. And so we just went through.
Like you could bounce between different edits of it. You could bounce between, like episode jumps like here and there. In fact, I remember like trying to find DVDs and videotapes of it, and there were just straight episodes you couldn't find.
Yeah, and like we jumped around, like a lot of the tapes we got at first was from the Namek saga. A lot of it was out of order, but that was like we had seen pretty much most of the Namek saga. We jumped back a little bit, saw some of the Saiyan saga, and then jumped a little bit forward as we went into the Android saga. Again, bits and pieces based on whatever we could find. And this was in the time when DVD was starting to become a thing. So sometimes we would place a hold thinking it was a VHS tape, only to find that it was the DVD, but we didn't have a DVD player. We abused the hold system and the renewal system a lot to watch the show. And so we basically got all these VHS tapes, and we just we watched it out of order. We enjoyed it so much so that one time, I think I still have the tape in my storage area because I still hold on to VHS tapes for some reason. And it was a tape that we actually ordered from Funimation's catalog. So it was we filled out the thing. I think it was either my mom or my sister who paid for it, where we filled out the little card that you can fill out to order it, and we ordered one of the filler tapes where it was taking place in the 3-year gap when they're training to prepare for the androids. That's specifically the one where Goku and Piccolo try to learn how to drive.
Oh, thank goodness. I love that episode.
I love it too.
Yeah, and so we literally ordered that tape, and we were all so excited. It's oh, hey, the tape arrived in the mail. And we all sat down and watched it, had a recap of the story so far, kind of showing from the original Dragon Ball to that point, and saying, oh, hey, and now here where we are. The Z Fighters are training to prepare for the androids that Trunks warned them about. And then it's a case where at some point Chi-Chi complains about them not having a car, and so Goku has to go and learn to drive, and hijinks ensue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what's funny is you were lucky. I was not able to get any tapes of the Saiyan saga. I had to wait until I can't remember what it was called. It was the Prelude to Kai, but basically it was the Dragon Ball Z Uncut, and it was aired on Adult Swim. And it was basically where they took a lot of the weird editing out. They weren't editing out butt cracks or, because Akira Toriyama has drawn a penis before. They weren't editing that out. And also they weren't editing out a lot of the cursing that I guess was in the original dub for it. And so that was my first exposure to the Saiyan saga. Up until that point, the most that you could get on Cartoon Network at that time was Majin Buu reruns. In the library system, you could get Frieza and maybe some of the androids, and Dragon Ball was running on Saturday nights on Cartoon Network, so that was easy.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we got to see the various iterations, the uncut, and especially with the early Saiyan Saga stuff, considering how those tapes were co-produced by Saban, and that's where you get Rock the Dragon as part of the intro and stuff like that. As for what made me a fan specifically, well, it's hard to pick any one moment where I just said, hey, I like this thing, because it was just something that kind of just brought me and my family together. It was just something that we were all excited about. So it's hard to really think if there was just any one moment that made me a fan. It was just, that was how it was. It started with watching that VHS tape of Death of a Prince, which was the title of the episode. And then after we all watched it, we're just hey, let's find more of this. And
hey, whatever works.
Yeah, much like gathering the Dragon Balls, we set about to gather the tapes as much as we could.
I like how that actually turned out. Shay, what about you? So your first moment watching Dragon Ball, and then the moment that made you a fan.
So I remember for me, the first moment I watched Dragon Ball was my brother was actually a huge fan of it. And we would watch it every morning before we went off to school. My mom would drop us off at my grandparents' house, and my dad was living there at the time. And we would sit down in the living room and we would watch Dragon Ball Z. My brother was a huge fan of it. I didn't know what the show was about. I wasn't a huge fan of it, really. I was like, I kind of want to watch something else.
This is for boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But I started to like it. And when I remember the first episode I think I saw of Dragon Ball Z was one of the first ones. So it was when Goku is letting Master Roshi and Bulma meet Gohan. And it went from there into the Raditz saga, into them meeting Vegeta into there and so on and so forth. And then I remember my brother, he actually had the Dragon Ball Z toys. So he had like Goku, he had Gohan, he had all of them like in their Super Saiyan modes, and he would play with them all the time. And even I thought they were actually pretty cool. And then I remember my brother got the History of Trunks on like VHS.
Wow.
I think like he bought it, or my dad bought it for him, and he also had Bardock, the father of Goku, as well. And I remember distinctly sitting at my grandparents' house in the living room on my dad's lap watching Bardock, the father of Goku, and I believe it was the uncut version as well, because there is like a portion where you see like baby Goku, so you see his privates, and I'm like turning away because I'm like all of like 10 maybe years old at the time when I saw this. So like I remember watching that, and then I remember my brother then got on DVD Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan, and us watching that on DVD as well. So my brother was a huge fan. For me, I remember distinctly watching Toonami, and it wasn't when Toonami aired on Saturdays. It was when Toonami aired every day during the week from like the hours of like 3 to 5. It was like 2002, 2003.
Yeah, for those who don't know what we're talking about, it eventually the block eventually got replaced with Maguzi, I think is what it was called. And then Toonami moved back to Saturday, but it was like that full 4 to 5 hour block.
Yeah, it was like, I distinctly remember that this is me kind of, I guess, speaking my age for some people. I remember distinctly the shows they showed on Toonami was they showed He-Man, then they showed Dragon Ball Z, then it went into Yu Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin was what I distinctly remember them showing.
No, that's
a lot.
right.
Yeah.
That was right, and then eventually they decided that Yu Yu Hakusho needed to go back up to Adult Swim, and then it went back down to Toonami. Yu Yu Hakusho had a weird run on Cartoon Network.
It did, but it was such a good show.
It's such a good show. At some point, it will get a Why We Geek podcast. I promise that.
Yes, please let me be on that one.
Okay, cool.
I remember wanting to watch Toonami for that specific block for Dragon Ball Z because they were airing the Frieza saga. And my brother always talked about Goku going Super Saiyan, but I never got a chance to see it. And he was like, yeah, he goes Super Saiyan after the death of Krillin. And I was like, I just want to see Krillin blow up so I can see Goku go Super Saiyan. That was all I wanted.
Well, let's just be honest. It's better than his Dragon Ball death. I'll say that.
I know. And then I remember also, better funny moment is my dad walking into the room when we were kids watching Dragon Ball Z. And he would always walk into the room when Goku was screaming. And so he's like, all they do is scream on this show. What are you guys watching? I could scream and make a show. Like my dad didn't get it.
That's kind of Sean Schemmel's thoughts on it too.
Yes. And I think for me, when I started to really fall in love with Dragon Ball Z was number one, when I saw Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan. That really made me really enjoy Dragon Ball Z. And then also when in 2008, Funimation started releasing the uncut box sets. Yeah. And I remember going to Best Buy when Best Buy had a bigger anime section and when you couldn't just stream anime everywhere, which I, wish.
Wow, Best Buy having a bigger anime section. Now that makes me feel old.
Now it's so small. But I would collect the box sets. And I remember I got up to like season like 10 or 9 of the box sets that they had released that were uncut, and I would watch them in college. Like if I had to do homework or like study for finals, I would pop it in that DVD and just sit down and watch it.
Yeah, no, I could. What's really sad is like I'm about to call unfair because like I had to go. As Romney's kind of pointed out, our library system was kind of limited. You had what you had, and our local Blockbuster had even less. Kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I remember I bought Sailor Moon at Blockbuster. I bought both the Sailor Moon movies, Sailor Moon R and Sailor Moon S, at Blockbuster.
Well,
on VHS.
And what was worse, I don't know if Romney has a similar story to this, but like my local Blockbuster, my local Hollywood Video, they had one Dragon Ball Z VHS and one DVD, and it was exactly the same thing, and it was the episode of Goku becoming Super Saiyan. All right, they didn't go past that at any given moment. And they didn't get any other DVDs. But the reason I'm saying unfair is because I also tracked down the movies since, I found what I could. and you just mentioned you got to see the 2 movies that I could not see during that whole process that everybody recommended to me at that time, and I had to wait until years later to stream them, to see them. I have only seen History of Trunks and Bardock recently.
I have them both on DVD because I remember Funimation released them as a double featurette on DVD like back in 2008, and I remember buying it because I was like, these are my 2 favorite ones. Like I need to buy this and I need to watch it. And I remember my dad was like, didn't your brother used to watch these like way back when y'all were kids? I was like, yes, but I love them now, man.
No, I remember getting I remember getting outright pissed at my dad one weekend because Toonami was going to do their limited run of Bardock, and I had never seen it, and I really, really wanted to see it. And it just so happened to be at the exact same time slot as something my dad was watching. I believe it was a remake of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he loves 20,000 Leagues.
Oh,
so at that point, we literally fought that entire weekend because I wanted to reserve the VCR so I could get this because his stuff was going to air, and I was screaming at him like, your stuff's going to air tomorrow. You know it is. You're going to watch it anyway. Mine isn't. Can we please let me record this? He's like, no, I'm the dad. I own the house. And yeah, we went back and forth, and it turned out I was right.
Oh my God.
Because his 20,000 Leagues thing happened the exact same time the next day, and it didn't happen with me with Bardock. So it was frustrating to be able to see those 2 movies. I have no problem saying that.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone in that regard, because
Nope.
much like you, there were some movies I missed out on where I saw History of Trunks and I saw Bardock, and I also saw Lord Slug, where like the VHS tapes we could find, but I didn't see Broly until, I guess, when I was in college, when I found the DVD at Big Lots, which for people who may not know, is one of those like stores where they buy the overstocked items from other places. So again, there are movies that I was able to see and some that I didn't, and especially considering that was still when they would like have the music that would be like from other bands. I know with like Lord Slug, they had like songs by Disturbed and stuff as part of the soundtrack, which was weird.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, my first exposure to Broly was actually, and this is going to make me sound old even more, is I got it on DVD at a GameStop. Do you remember when GameStop used to have the DVDs? They've only recently brought it back, but yeah, like I found Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan at my local GameStop, and I was getting, I think it was one of the Xenosaga games. It was like, this is just like $10, I'll take this too, because I really wanted to see what the Broly hype was about. Like everybody was screaming about Broly.
Yeah, I can't remember where we bought ours.
Oh, jeez.
Somewhere.
And then,
Maybe Suncoast?
and then you saw the Broly sequels, and you regretted it just like everybody else.
Well,
I did. I went all the way up to Bio Broly. I'm like, he's just a goo.
Yeah, and it's sad when the final lines of Bio Broly are immediately a much better movie idea than Bio Broly.
Pretty much. I mean, for crying out loud, at least Second Coming has something of a fight that you can watch.
Yes.
So on to the next question here, and it's only appropriate because Dragon Ball spans so much, so many episodes over the years. And I think it's only appropriate to put this in a kind of a best and worst category, and that is your best and worst series for Dragon Ball. So basically what I'm trying to do, I'm narrowing things down a little bit into the actual series themselves. So Dragon Ball itself, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, or Goku Time. I know a lot of people think it's Grand Tour because of the rap song. It's Goku Time.
Actually, it isn't Goku Time with...
Oh, is it?
No, it is Grand Tour. That was actually Toriyama's initial idea, but the real reason it was called GT is because Toriyama's a huge fan, is a huge car fan, and so he got the idea of, like, I don't know which, like, it was like the Cruiser GT was where they got the idea. So yeah, it actually is Grand Tour. Like, that was like the initial idea from Toriyama. So it's not Goku Time, it was Grand Tour.
Masako!
Yeah, even from Toriyama, because Geekdom 101 did a video explaining that, yeah, Toriyama was the one who pitched the name GT. Yes, it was like Grand Tour because it was meant to be a grand adventure, but it's also because he's a fan of the Cruiser GT car and thought, hey, this will be a nice little thing.
So the series themselves, there's Dragon Ball, there's Z, there's GT, there's Super. Superheroes is a recent one, but your best and worst Dragon Ball series. And by that I mean, like, if you think Dragon Ball you must watch this series. It doesn't necessarily matter the sagas or anything like that. You must watch the series, and if you have that nostalgic point for the worst, you completely avoid it. Like, you cannot watch it to this day. You just can't do it. And for me, it's pretty cut and dry, a little bit, or at least as far as the best is concerned. It's Z. Z to me has had all. I grew up in a sci-fi family, people. I'm a fantasy lover, and I love the original Dragon Ball, but Z, to me, just had more elements going for it. It wasn't as I can appreciate the Dragon Ball humor now, but back as a 20-something who was just sitting there going, I must be all butch, yeah! Z is the only way that worked. And so I always look fondly upon Z, and when I want to watch Dragon Ball, I tend to go that direction. My worst, however, is a little bit of a tie, and it's simply because both of them have issues that I just can't seem to get over. And that first one, obviously, is GT. I like GT. I think that there's a lot to like there, but there's also a lot of issues with it. Specifically, I tend to not like the arc that everybody does. I tend to not like the baby arc. And find it very difficult to go through. I can only do it like near the end when Super Saiyan 4 is unlocked. And aptly enough, my favorite saga is the Super 17 saga. It just works for me. Probably because of the androids. But it's also tied with Super. Because Super, even though I love a lot of what Super has been able to do, man, it's made a lot of missteps. It really had, like, even in a lot of cases where I know what I'm walking into. It's a shonen anime, which means there's going to be tons of filler. Even I'm kind of looking at it and going, yeah, you could still cut this down by about 20 episodes, and you could still keep some of the filler arcs. It would still be more entertaining than this.
It's almost like they're having to make it up as they go along.
And yes, I am talking about the the Tournament of Power arc. That went a touch longer than it should have, as far as I'm concerned. But those are worse just simply because of disappointment. Thankfully, I can still pick up any of these and get some enjoyment out of it. I just gotta pick and choose my episodes. Shay, what about you? What is your best Dragon Ball series, and what is your worst?
Best is, I also have to agree with you. I have to go with Dragon Ball Z. For me, the reason why it's the best is because that's where my nostalgia is. Like, that's where I grew up watching. And that was like my first introduction to the whole like Dragon Ball universe. Mm-hmm. So that I have to go with as being the best, because it's something that I can put on TV and it takes me back to that moment as a little kid watching it and being obsessed over it and wanting to do the moves and wanting to Kamehameha and everything.
Yes.
For worst, I probably have to go with GT as well. Just because for me, GT came at an interesting time for me, because it was on Toonami, but it was at a time where I didn't watch a whole lot of anime. Like, I wasn't really deeply into it, and I was only really watching Toonami at the time to watch Inuyasha, which I could never stay up for long enough.
Yeah.
So
see, it's funny that Romney brings up, like, his family was all drawn together because of Dragon Ball. That was my family. We all were drawn together to watch Inuyasha together. I can't even explain it to this day.
For me with GT, I had heard a lot about it, and I remember sitting down and watching like maybe like one episode, and I was so confused, and I was like, why is Goku a child? I'm lost. What's happening? And I remember tuning in because at one point it was like, it's the last episode of Dragon Ball GT. Everyone has to watch it. And I was like, I'm going to watch it. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. So I probably have to go with
Yeah, I can understand that too.
I was that person, so I'm like, I probably have to go with GT just because I don't really have a connection to it. So for me, I'm like,
Well,
I don't have to sit down.
The other problem with that episode 2 is that in order to truly understand it, you had to know the original Dragon Ball as well. And some people weren't even at that point because they were like me. They were watching it for the first time on Toonami or on Cartoon Network Saturday block. So they were just kind of up a creek overall with that episode. There were so many homages to stuff they hadn't seen.
Yep.
So, all right. And so I can understand a lot of the reasoning there. I mean, GG just had a lot of problems, the bottom line. It just did. which is really just kind of sad. Romney, what about you? Your best and your worst Dragon Ball series?
Well, I'm probably going to be kind of the outlier in saying this, but as for the best, I would have to go with the first series, the original Dragon Ball. The reason for me is that, although, yeah, Z was kind of where we started, I kind of enjoyed some of the fights in the original Dragon Ball more than in Z. Because Z, yeah, there were some cool moments here and there, like Goku going Super Saiyan during the Frieza saga, and then Gohan's big explosion during the Cell saga. Like, those are really cool moments. But the fights, at least in the first World Martial Arts Tournament, where Goku and Krillin have just finished training under Master Roshi and are putting their skills to the test, those fights had kind of a better pace to it. And especially since that had a kind of a better balance with comedy as well. I mean, when you have Krillin fighting against Bacterian, and then you have Nam, who kind of has the most sympathetic arc out of everyone participating in the tournament, where Goku and Krillin and Yamcha, they're there. It's like, hey, we're just going to be there to kind of test our strength. Whereas Nam's just like, I am literally fighting to save my people because we don't have any water to drink. I cannot lose.
No, and the original Dragon Ball has a lot of really great moments and actually is able to properly highlight some characters that get, well, straight up forgotten in Z.
Yeah, I mean, and so I would say, if I were to say, hey, this is something you need to watch if you want to watch Dragon Ball, I definitely would have to say the original, because there the power scaling is a lot easier to keep track of. There's not a lot of confusion about, like, oh, Super Saiyan 37 or this weird fusion form. It's a case of, okay, like, the abilities are a lot more scaled down. The opponents are a bit easier to understand. And again, I'm kind of more partial because it's a bit more comedic.
And
you see,
correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the scaling happens in the original Dragon Ball is kind of like Yu Yu Hakusho. It's not necessarily just that you can feel their energy level. It's that the energy is actually like radiating pure emotion to it. Like I remember hearing not necessarily Tao, but a couple of Piccolo's forces where it's like, wow, this aura just emanates despair kind of thing.
Yeah, and even then, it has kind of that more mythic progression for it. And so, although, yeah, Z was kind of where it started for me, I hold a lot of nostalgia both for the original Dragon Ball, but also some of the Dragon Ball movies specifically, like Sleeping Princess in Devil's Castle, Mystical Adventure, even though the continuity of the movies is always a bit wonky, but then again, Toriyama himself has admitted, hey, I kind of forget things, so that would be, I would consider the best is the original series, where you kind of see where everything started, where you kind of get to learn more about the characters and the world, and you kind of see a bit more of the martial arts taking focus in the combat, as opposed to later on, where it's a case of either bigger ki blasts, charging up attacks for 50 episodes, or trying to basically do various, power-ups, pull it out of nowhere.
In Dragon Ball, it's how we can wreck the arena. In Z, it's how we can wreck the planet. In GT and Super, it's how we can wreck the universe.
Yeah. As for the worst, it's hard to say because, again, as I've mentioned in previous podcast episodes, I'm kind of one of those people that fell off after the Cell Saga, where the Cell Saga just kind of caps off everything, and so I didn't really watch much of the Buu Saga, mainly because I watched the episodes, but I got kind of bored, so it was a case of, okay, I'm gonna move on to the next big anime. What is it? Yu-Gi-Oh? Okay. Yeah. And so that's kind of what happened to me but as for like the worst of the multiple series, I mean, I would kind of consider GT and Super kind of tied, especially given that my first introduction to Super was with Resurrection F and how it was basically a glorified commercial for Super.
Oh, yeah.
And then GT, it had a lot of problems, but it's kind of one of those cases where, yeah, I can see what they were going for, but both Super and GT very much being anime series that were being kind of thought up on the fly. Like, you can see germs of good ideas, but they didn't exactly work for me, so I still haven't really watched much of Super. I've been starting to read them.
Like, I kind of agree with a lot of the aspects here, and I think you're going to as well, Romney, but a lot of things on GT looked amazing on paper and failed in execution.
Yeah, not to mention raised a lot more questions than answers when you consider with the Shadow Dragon arc, it's a case of, wait, how are these the wishes from the original Dragon Balls, considering that they went inert the first time with the death of the dragon during the Piccolo saga.
Yeah.
Then when Piccolo died during the Saiyan saga, they went inert. Then when Kami fused with Piccolo Jr., they then disappeared, meaning that you had new Dragon Balls made by Dende. Then how the heck are they having those original wishes if the Dragon Balls we have now are the ones made by Dende? And so it's one of those things where, yeah, sounded good on paper, but it very much was one of those cases where...
It definitely needed a couple of rewrites.
Yeah. And as for an honorable mention, as for, like, best, and it's one I'm surprised we kind of didn't really bring up, if people are wanting to really look at Dragon Ball Z, I'm going to kind of be kind of the outliers here and think, hey, if you want to watch Z, maybe watch Kai. Because Kai kind of is a more faithful version of the story. As Toei has put it, it's like, oh, it's more true to the manga, even though there's still some filler elements in there. If you're wanting a more faithful version, especially with the English dub, a more faithful translation of Dragon Ball Z, especially with much better, much cleaner looking visuals that are actually remastered by Toei, I definitely would recommend maybe checking out Kai instead of going for the original Z, because there, the filler's a bit trimmed down. You don't have to worry about the Garlic Jr. saga, and it's a lot more faithful to the intent of the original Japanese creators.
Exactly. So with that being said, let's move on into the next one. So I find it funny, like a lot of us kind of had the exact same agreement, at least as far as worst series here. You know, you'll come across those Dragon Ball fans that absolutely vehemently hate GT or vehemently hate Super. But for us, it was just like, we don't hate GT or Super. We just think that there was stuff to work on, kind of thing. I find that funny that all three of us kind of said that. But moving on into the next question here, it's only appropriate to ask this. I do a favorite character kind of thing on this podcast, but this one I'm gonna put a caveat here, okay? Because here's the bottom line. Certain characters are going to get mentioned. A lot. So, favorite character, but I'm going to put the caveat in of favorite Saiyan character and favorite non-Saiyan character. Because here's the thing. There are actual other Z warriors than the Saiyans, okay? And I know that a lot of us, myself included, including Romney, who loves the original Dragon Ball, would like to give them a little bit of a spotlight, okay? Because some of them actually had really great character arcs. For me, my favorite Saiyan character, if people watch the 12 Days of Anime, you know who it is. Vegeta. At my point walking into the series, Vegeta is still my favorite character, and it's simply because Vegeta, unlike Goku, I'm not a fan of Goku, guys. I'm not knocking him. I get why he's there. I get why he's a staple of the series. But to me, Vegeta actually goes through a character arc. Goku just kind of doesn't in Z. Bottom line. Vegeta actually goes from being a legitimate villain to being kind of I don't want to say he's an anti-hero at that point, but he's definitely going tweener, leaning towards babyface. And then Super is where he has his full-on babyface turn. So I love the fact that I was able to follow that character arc from beginning to end. It was so awesome to be able to see it the first time. And frankly, Vegeta is probably the most enjoyment I got out of Super. Just being able to see all of the development that happened with him. As far as I am concerned, the main character of Super, at least the main hero of Super, is Vegeta. It's not Goku. Goku's causing all the problems. That's at least as far as I'm concerned. But my favorite Saiyan character is Vegeta. My favorite non-Saiyan character is going to be kind of rinse, lather, repeat, because they both kind of share a lot of traits in common, and that is Piccolo. The way I look at it is simply this. Piccolo is Vegeta, but slower. And the reason I say that is because you actually, like, if you feel to some extent like I kind of do, where certain moments, certain pivotal turns with Vegeta were kind of sped across, Piccolo, if you watch Dragon Ball all the way into Z, you can see that evolution happen much more slowly, and it's a lot more enjoyable. In fact, he's another thing I loved out of Super, just trying to figure out, like, if Piccolo wanted to actually be a warrior, or if he was just happy being Pan's nanny. Because, you know, he could have done either way, and it would have been perfectly fine, but I like the arc that Piccolo actually goes through to the point where after merging with Kami, he's like this sage now. He understands the light and the life of the earth and wants to be able to help things out, but at the same time, he still has his own ambitions. He still wants to be able to train with Goku. He still wants to be able to help Goku if he could possibly do it. Piccolo is just like I said. Piccolo to me is just Vegeta but slower. And if you want to just sit back and have those Zen moments, then you watch Piccolo. That's the way that it goes. Stephen Romney, what about you? Your favorite Saiyan character and your favorite non-Saiyan character?
Well, it's a tough one. In terms of favorite Saiyan, I mean, it's a bit of a two-way tie, mainly just because of what the thematic connections are. I guess it's kind of tied for me between Future Trunks and Gohan, because Gohan, you kind of have the arc, because contrasted to Goku, who very much is like, hey, I want to be a fighter, I want to become strong. When we first meet Gohan, he's very much a pacifist. He doesn't really like fighting, but then you have his tell, which is like, oh yeah, he doesn't really like fighting. He's a bit of a scaredy cat, but if you piss him off, you're gonna get wrecked.
Yeah.
And that kind of is like the slow build-up throughout the course of Z, where you see it early on in the Raditz saga, you see Piccolo kind of push Gohan further, you see Gohan snap quite a few times on Namek, and then the final payoff being when he's facing Cell and with the death of 16, finally like breaking, like kind of pushing him over the edge. And then with Future Trunks, the reason why I find his character fascinating is because, well, unlike the other Z warriors, it's a case where he basically grew up in a world where the world had gone to crap because of the androids. And so the only real people in his life that he cared about that were still alive were his mother, Bulma, and Gohan again, but this time as an adult, who kind of lacked that focus that he would later get during the Buu saga because, well, the people that would have trained Gohan were killed by the androids in that timeline.
Yep.
And so it's kind of just interesting to contrast how both the child Saiyans are like almost the polar opposites of their fathers, where Gohan is more of a calm pacifist who just kind of likes to study and just wants to be a good boy, and Trunks kind of the same case of, hey, he doesn't have that Saiyan pride. He's not out to prove that he's better than everyone. He just wants to, keep the people around him alive and basically be a hero. And that contrast is interesting to me, just how you see these characters and how they're so different from their parents, but also the similarities that are there, where you see Gohan's instincts as a Saiyan still kind of eking out when he's pushed too far, that instinct to kind of go into the full Ozaru mode, even when he loses his tail, where he still has that as a part of him, and then him finally accepting that, yes, this is a part of who I am, but I'm not gonna lose control. I'm going to control this strength. And again, with Trunks, is kind of in that same case of, yeah, I am my father's son, but I'm fighting for something that's actually important. I'm not gonna.
That's the difference that I would say with Trunks is, like, you have this. You don't necessarily deal with the Saiyan pride issue, but you definitely deal with him trying to prove himself to Vegeta.
Yeah, and especially when you see the interactions where Vegeta keeps letting the androids go or keeps letting Cell go so he'll become stronger, and he's just like, you are like, what the hell are you doing, Dad? I am trying to save your life, and you're not making this easy. What the hell? And then naturally, of course, because of Vegeta's pride, Cell absorbs both the androids and becomes stronger, and then promptly gets wrecked because of his Saiyan pride. And then it's only until Trunks is killed by Cell that Vegeta finally gets, yeah, this was actually a dumb idea. That's when Vegeta starts to reveal his emotions a little bit and put aside his pride. And it kind of, you see that more in Super with how he's become more attached to Bulma and Trunks. And
I was going to say, are you going to bring up Battle of the Gods here?
Not just Battle of the Gods, but when you see, because I've seen some clips in terms of when Bulma is born and how he's like, at the start of the series, he's always kind of dismissive of Trunks a little bit, but then when Bulma's born, he's like suddenly like very protective. And I find it kind of funny how everyone else, even Mr. Satan, gets to hold Bulma before he gets the chance, and how that just pisses him off, where even Mr. Freaking Satan gets to hold his daughter before he does, and that just makes him angry.
I just felt bad for him. Like, he went to all the trouble of finding a proud Saiyan name for Bulma, and he's about to announce it to the heavens. He's like, I want to name the daughter, and it is Bulma. And it's just like Bulma comes out of nowhere, and he's like,
yeah.
That just shows you how much change that character went through, because if this had been the Cell arc, they would be arguing.
Actually, it would even be a case if it was the Cell arc, Vegeta probably wouldn't even be there. He'd just be off in space training to beat Goku.
This is true.
that would probably be the case. I mean, you see it a little bit in the credit sequences of I believe it's like the history of Trunks. If you look at the Japanese credits where they show kind of the montages between Goten growing up with Gohan and Chi-Chi, and then Trunks growing up with Vegeta and Bulma, how dismissive Vegeta kind of is of like, oh, why am I dealing with this brat kid? But then slowly getting attached just in his own way. As for favorite non-Saiyan character, it's a character that kind of gets a lot of crap. I mean, I can see why, but that's mainly because people mostly have only seen Z. They haven't seen Dragon Ball to see how it started, and that would have to be Krillin.
No, you're absolutely right. Krillin gets a lot of crap, and it's actually one of the things I do affectionately like about Super is that they've kind of turned that around for him.
Yeah, because what people forget is that in Dragon Ball, Krillin wasn't always the happy, like, hey, I'm Goku's friend. When you first meet Krillin, he's kind of a dick.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he's like Goku, where he likes to fight, but he's not above using dirty tactics.
I love seeing the cartoon strips when people try to go into Dragon Ball, and it's just like you look at all the people who technically could count as a villain for Goku, and all of his friends are roughly at that point. So Krillin, Yamcha, Tien, Piccolo, all the way up to Beerus. Like all of his friends are at one point his worst enemies.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like where you first see Krillin starting out, he's kind of the more deceptive foil to Goku as they both start training to Master Roshi. But then over the course of the training and over the course of the tournament, he becomes a better fighter and a better person as a whole. Going from being a monk who left his order because he was bullied by older monks to now saying, hey, yeah, I can prove myself. I can hold my own against these strong fighters. And then even when you see in the events of Z how he kind of becomes almost the surrogate older brother to Gohan after the events of the Saiyan Saga, and how on Namek he's kind of like, hey, let's kind of make sure we're kind of keeping an eye on each other. He's always kind of looking out for him. And especially when you consider that it's like everyone gives Krillin crap, like, oh yeah, he's weak. But when you consider that he ends up with the smoking hot wife and loving family, it's a case of, yeah, Krillin's got it pretty good. He's probably the only member of the Z Fighters whose family life is actually pretty stable. Pretty stable.
And one of the things I like to point out also with Krillin is, like, I've really appreciated what Team 4-Star eventually did with Krillin, where they made fun of him just like everybody else did. But if you look at it, at the end of that Cell Saga, who got the major comeuppance? It was him. So I thought that was actually a really awesome thing to be able to do, considering that Lanny really did like basically putting Krillin in the crap bucket, so to speak. I thought that was really appropriate that they gave the final moment of their Cell Saga to Krillin, technically. I'm not going any further than that. I'm not going to explain it. This is a family-oriented show. But that being said, so Shay, your favorite Saiyan character and non-Saiyan character?
I hate to say it, but for the Saiyan characters, I have like a 3-way tie.
Okay, all right.
So just because you guys named all of my favorite ones. I mean, I like Vegeta because Vegeta's just so entertaining, and he came in, I hate to quote a Miley Cyrus song, but he came in like a wrecking ball and like tore everything to pieces, kind of. But then he turned out to be just a really entertaining and very funny character overall. Like when you first watch Z, you actually don't think Vegeta's gonna stick around very long. You're like, oh, okay, he's might get beat and then that's it. But then he sticks around and you just see like his character overall change, just as both of you have mentioned. I also like Gohan as well because he just had the best like character development overall, because you see him go from a kid to a teenager to an adult with his own like wife and child as well. So it's like you see him go from like you guys mentioned, going from like the little kid that didn't want to fight and was like kind of a very whiny baby that you were kind of like, you know, please just grow a pair. I mean, come on. And then
very
to him finally then to him finally like actually like growing a pair and like actually fighting when it counts the most, and you're like, all right, you can put in some work. And then of course Trunks, because Trunks to me had one of the best introductions ever, especially when you look at the history when he comes in and he talks to Goku and comes in from the future, and they don't know who he is, and he like explains to Goku whom he is, and he's like, my mom is Bulma, and my dad's Vegeta, and he flips out. That's still like my all-time favorite moment.
Oh, you mean
ever.
when he tells Goku about
when
it?
He tells Goku like who he is.
Yeah.
No, he can't. And Goku's just like, what? Like, that's like my all-time favorite moment. It's like just seeing him flip out like that. And then of course you as the viewer finding this out, and you're like, the two most unlikely people are the get together and have a child. Like, wait a minute, they really tripping. But those like are my three like favorite like Saiyans overall, just because they all have like
I'd
very
be on
pivotal
board
moments.
with you guys on Trunks if we're just talking about future Trunks. Okay.
Yeah,
because
future, not Kid Trunks.
Kid Trunks
Kid
is
Trunks
an arrogant little
though.
son of a bitch. I have no problem saying that.
I will say though, he's very funny, and to see him interact with Goten, and them two are just like, they're like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They're just both getting into havoc together, and it's so funny.
It's one of the things that I really enjoy about the Goku Black arc is like when you have those breathing moments where future Trunks and Kid Trunks get to kind of know each other. And you get to see the differences between the two characters. Future Trunks has obviously gone through a lot of crap in his life. He's very humble. And up until this point, Kid Trunks has an arrogance streak like nobody's business. He is his father's son.
Yes.
And so at that point,
when he's a kid,
it's interesting. Well, yeah, he's an arrogant little schmuck kid. And so at that point, it gets worse. But then he gets to see his future self and just see how humble he is. And you actually get to see a little bit of a character arc happen with Kid Trunks. So that's where I'm in agreement with you guys. Future Trunks is amazing. Kid Trunks, he needs a spanking every now and then.
Yeah, it's almost like he's a spoiled rich kid or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then for me, favorite non-Z character, just like was already said, was Krillin. Just because Krillin was like Goku's road dog. Like, he was there from the beginning. Like, yeah, like, granted, yes, as I've heard in Dragon Ball, he was, a bit of a problem. But like seeing him mostly like DBZ, like he was always there for Goku. Like he was the true definition of like a best friend. Like, he was down for anything Goku wanted to do, but he was there to be like, are you sure about that? Like, you don't want to think? No. Okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna be right there with you.
If you consider what they were facing, like Tien spends most of Z traveling. Like he's off doing the wandering loner shtick. Yamcha would come in, but
Yamcha's crying.
Yamcha's crying, dying. He doesn't train. He doesn't do anything like that.
He just spends his time playing baseball, basically.
Pretty much. And so at that
and
point,
trying to get with Bulma.
It's obvious that Yamcha's kind of going down a different path, but Krillin goes from being, as Romney pointed out in Dragon Ball, being that deceitful little crap, to actually being probably the most loyal friend, maybe aside from Piccolo, that Goku has.
Yeah.
Like, he's been there for all of them.
Yeah, and to be fair, Piccolo is not really loyal to Goku. He's more loyal to Gohan more than he is to Goku.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's
because
true.
Hashtag
very
Piccolo
true.
is Gohan's father.
Yes. But and Krillin was also kind of like a big brother to like Gohan a little bit. They were about the same height, so it made sense in some ways, because it was like literally there's like moments where you're like, they are literally the same height. And it was also very satisfying though to see like Krillin like, have a family. And I was actually really happy when he had a family. And then when I actually saw though that he could grow hair, I was like, oh my God, he has hair.
No. It got worse than that. Boo Saga, he had the porn stash.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was like, who agreed to give him hair?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm not even kidding. Like, somebody made the joke in my family, like, because he had that, because in the Boo Saga, he was wearing like that weird red vest and like that kind of the half suit kind of deal. This was the first time we'd ever seen him in a suit. Always we'd seen him in the gis. And somebody was just like, dude, he looks like an anime version of Mel Brooks. And he's not wrong.
No. Although that does remind me of one moment I do like from GT, and it's from the very end after the Shadow Dragon art where Goku's basically kind of going around saying goodbye to everyone. And so he decides to visit Kame House, and Krillin is like much older, and he's like, "Hey, Krillin, let's have one like last sparring session." Like not, and he doesn't even say, "Oh, it's the last one." It's like, "Hey, let's have a quick sparring session." Even though we know it's like, oh, he's saying goodbye to Krillin, but it's just like, oh, he's just visiting a friend, and he's just like, "Hey, Krillin, you're really strong. You've really come a long way since the beginning." That's probably one of the few moments from GT that I like, is just how Goku kind of went around to say goodbye to all of his friends and everyone, and especially between that exchange between him and Krillin, kind of bringing it full circle. It's like, hey, they both kind of trained together under Master Roshi, and so naturally their last moment together is at Kame House sparring in front of Master Roshi.
And then later in Super, Krillin would ask Goku to punch him at Super Saiyan. It wouldn't end well.
Never does. I mean, he does get bitch slapped through a house on a regular basis. So
I mean, if you were married to 18 and you just did stupid things, it'd happen. Well, and actually, are we talking about 18 or are we talking about Chi-Chi? Because either way, you're screwed.
Both.
I was even including Raditz in there because I mean,
oh yeah, that too.
Yeah. Again, Krillin is kind of the person that he's the one who charges in head first, then gets his butt handed to him in order to establish okay, this guy's an actual threat.
Yeah.
Because what people forget is, I mean, people have talked about how amongst all the Z fighters, and even I think Toriyama's even confirmed this, Krillin is the strongest of all the humans of the Z fighters. Where
Toriyama's given him the title of strongest on Earth, if I remember correctly. He's the strongest Earthling.
Yeah, the strongest Earthling, and yet he's very humble about it. But then again, it's a case where, he's just a normal guy. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, a lot of people theorize like, oh yeah, in another universe, he'd basically be One Punch Man.
Pretty much. I mean, it's not even wrong. Like, he could, if it, in fact, one of the things I really do like about the fact that, of Krillin's arc, especially in Super, is he becomes a cop. Like, I can't think of a better placement for him. I mean, he could go to a temple and start training people, but no, he wants to be able to help out his local neighborhood, so he's the local cop. All right?
Yeah.
I know that Super uses this as a joke, but I liked it. I like the idea.
Well, yeah, and it speaks to Krillin's character, because when you look at someone like Yamcha, who is very much about fame, he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to become a professional athlete and kind of become famous that way, whereas Krillin kind of is like, okay, I'm just going to remain invisible, going to just, like, help the people around me, and use, like, my strength and everything to try to make the world a better place, because, well, that's what Goku kind of does, even though Goku may not be aware that that's what he does, but that's what he brings out in the people he encounters with. And I just liked it how in Resurrection F, one of the few funny moments was how Krillin's ringtone was the One Piece theme. Which,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Again, it's an inside joke, because what people may not know if they only see it dubbed is that the Japanese voice for Krillin is also the Japanese voice for Luffy, and both shows are produced by Toei Animation.
Yeah, so I actually had to be told that. And I found that very, very amusing. All right, so moving on into the next question, and since we're talking about Saiyans and non-Saiyans, it's only appropriate that we discuss this. One of the things that Dragon Ball is known for is transformations. In fact, one of them, like I said, I mean, Blockbuster Video would not get a DVD other than it because it is that popular. It is still considered a pinnacle moment in Japan, because it forever changed that series and how things were going to go. And so the next question that we have, and it's actually listener requested if we ever tackle Dragon Ball, your favorite 2 transformations. I'm expanding it. This guy said do 1, but I'm going to expand it because there's a lot of really great first transformations in Dragon Ball as a whole, especially if you consider current canon. So at that point, if you have 2 that you have in contention, it's no problem if you want to be able to bring them here. And for me, my first one is very obvious, as it is a very powerful moment, and for good reason. It's not Goku going Super Saiyan. I like that moment just as much as anybody else, but to me, the more powerful moment is Gohan going Super Saiyan 2 for the first time. Just because of the raw emotion that happens at that moment. You got to keep in mind, guys, Gohan is being built this entire series as possibly being stronger than any other Z fighter out there. He just doesn't know it yet. He has potential to do that, but because Chi-Chi wants him to go do homework, it's questionable whether or not he'll actually hit this point. Except when it came to Cell, he had to hit that point. And I can't think of a better villain for that to happen to. I can't think of a better moment for it to basically be unleashed. By that I mean Cell stomping on 16's head. And therefore you have the symbolism of the dove in Gohan's eyes, and immediately you know what Gohan's been saying up until that point is true. He has never liked fighting. He's never wanted to unleash this side of him. He doesn't know what will happen if it does. And the sheer gravity of consequence hits you the second that he hits Super Saiyan 2 for the first time. And you know it's a whole new echelon of power, not because of the people freaking out, but because of the sheer look of him. This is not the Gohan you've come to love in Dragon Ball Z. This is a Gohan that's completely and irrevocably unleashed. You know shit's gonna go down. And for my second, it's actually a tie, but for good reason. Because this moment happened in both Super and GT, and that's when Vegeta, the Prince of all Saiyans, finally ascends. I can't put them higher than the other. Vegeta ascending to Super Saiyan 4, even though he cheated, is still an awesome moment just because of the one line he says, "At long last, I have ascended." And you get to have that moment for Vegeta, and he is now back in the power box as far as I'm concerned. And the same thing happens in Super when he turns blue for the first time. And I actually like the fact that the dub of this has also added that line in. Not Resurrection F the movie, but the series did say, yes, it's true. At long last, I have ascended. And so at that point, you get to have that amazing line from the Prince of all Saiyans for both versions, and it's just as powerful whether he be covered in fur or he be covered in an aura of pure blue. Dabba-dee-dabba-die. So those are mine. Shay, let's go ahead and start with you. Your top 2 transformations of Dragon Ball.
For me, well, I don't even know if I have 2. I know I definitely have 1. So I know one of them is definitely Trunks going Super Saiyan for the first time in the history of Trunks.
Yes.
When you see him go Super Saiyan after the death of Gohan. Because he had been trying so hard. And the only thing I think Gohan was like, it happens like if there's like extreme stress or something extremely emotional happens.
Yeah,
and
it's extreme anger, isn't it, Romney?
Yeah, extreme anger.
Yeah, that's what Gohan like tells him to focus on during those early scenes. Like, focus on the pain that the androids cause. Focus on the anger.
But he didn't. He couldn't do it. Like, and then finally, when they kill Gohan, he feels that intense rage and emotion of losing his mentor. That was all he had. And then you just see that moment, and then like you as a viewer are just like seeing that happen and seeing all that emotion. So for me, that was probably my favorite.
And to me, I literally look
because
at that.
I felt that.
I literally look at that as like a precursor to Gohan, because that, to me, to my knowledge, I mean, a lot of people were running off of Goku reacting to Krillin, and this was basically confirmation that anger was what brought about the Super Saiyan form. Aside from Gohan's training. And so at that point, this was actually a really great precursor to Gohan turning Super Saiyan 2, because Gohan had never been angry, at least legitimately angry, and you got to see what happened to Trunks. And he didn't have years of being pissed at that point. He had one pivotal moment.
Yeah. So I think that for me is my favorite one. I don't really have, that's why I was like, I don't really have 2. I kind of want to say Goku turning for the first time, just because that was a pivotal moment for everyone. Like, just seeing their first, like, just seeing their first, like, seeing a character get that mad and then having them change colors for God's sakes. You're like, his hair is like yellow and like gold, and his eyes are green. Like, what is going on? And then I guess for me, that'd probably be my number 2, just because that was the first one. And it was such a pivotal moment, like you mentioned, just for the entire series of like showing people like this is not your usual fighting series.
What also made that moment powerful, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's not necessarily the golden aura, because you got to remember, guys, we got spoiled. Super Saiyan when it came to the States, because we had the Rock the Dragon intro that showcased Super Saiyan. We knew that knew that there was going to be something that happened that turned them blonde. What worked for us, because we didn't know necessarily how powerful it was immediately turning to Frieza and seeing for the first time. He has been walking the floor with everybody up until this point. He is legitimately afraid for his life. Mm-hmm. That's the power of that moment as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Also with it being the death of Krillin, because like no one, I don't believe, was like expecting that. Like kind of they were, but they're like, it's Krillin.
Point. I didn't care at that point. I didn't know who Krillin was. I now care because I know who the character is and I know he's gone through. But when I first saw that moment, that's why it's not as powerful to me, is that I didn't know the person that died. I knew that was I knew that the kid right next to him was Goku's kid, but I didn't know that guy. And I knew that the other guy there was the villain. And so at that point, a lot of that was lost.
Yeah, that's true. Also for me, when I remember that the main reason why I want to see Goku go Super Saiyan was just because I knew they killed Krillin. So I was like, please just let me see him go Super Saiyan. That's all I want.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider with how long the fight had been going against Frieza and how even a Spirit Bomb wasn't enough to put Frieza down.
Let's just be honest. The Spirit Bomb wasn't enough the entire length of Z.
Yeah.
It was such a long series.
It really was.
Oh, God.
All right, Romney, your top 2 transformations in Dragon Ball.
Well, it's tough to say beyond kind of what we've already discussed, but I'm going to throw one that's probably an off-the-wall. It's technically a Saiyan transformation, but it's not one that most people think of. That would have to be the Ozaru transformation, especially with how it kind of comes into play during the battle against Vegeta in the Saiyan saga, where first Vegeta kind of transforms and is basically wrecking everything in his Great Ape form, and then how after Yajirobe cuts his tail, he's basically reduced, but then because he had that artificial moon, it triggers Gohan's transformation, and basically it kind of takes what would have been Vegeta's method of basically becoming Earth's destroyer, backfires on Vegeta horribly, where he then starts getting wrecked by giant ape Gohan, and then he has to cut off the tail, but that is basically like, that's like the epitome of his pride being literally crushed into the ground, is that, the very form that I was going to use to basically kill everyone on Earth is what literally like breaks my body as a result. And just kind of that whole reframing what would have been a force of destruction as Earth's salvation. It's an interesting thematic element that I like. And it's something that you see a lot of callbacks to throughout the series, both in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and if you look at the Japanese dub as well, you notice it as well, where with Goku's first fight against King Piccolo, when he does his giant punch attack, and you see kind of that image of the Great Ape behind him where he's tapping into that primal strength to finish King Piccolo. And then in the Japanese dub, they allude to it when Goku goes Super Saiyan, where you hear kind of that same giant ape roar when he first transforms. It's something we don't really see in the English dub because it's something they didn't really clue into until much later. But then you also see when Goku goes Super Saiyan 3, where literally one of the images is like kind of shows the image of the Great Ape. Again, Goku tapping into that primal rage thing. And then that's something they called back to even most recently in Dragon Ball Super Broly, where Broly had his tail cut off, but he was able to tap into that giant ape.
They basically confirmed it. It confirmed a theory that was long held.
Yeah, and it basically, like, the source of Broly's like immense strength was that he was able to tap into that Great Ape form. He wasn't able to become the physical ape, but he slipped into that mindset of losing all control and just basically rampaging like a force of nature. And so that would be one of my favorite Saiyan transformations, that because of just kind of what it represents and how the Saiyans, as they go through the different forms, have to tap into that. And the other transformation that I'm going to list as my favorite serves as a nice counterpoint to it, and that would have to be Super Saiyan God, the first form of it, when Goku was having to put aside his own pride and rely on everyone else's strength in order to achieve it the first time.
Too.
Yeah, again, it's almost like they're making this up on the fly, but I liked that the idea behind that first time where they had to transform, because Goku was all about using his own strength, but having to rely on Vegeta, Gohan, Trunks, Goten, and the then unborn Pan to tap into that power, because it's a case of, hey, like stuff is going really, really bad. This is the god of destruction. It may not be my strength, but this is what I have to do to save the Earth. But it also serves as a nice, interesting counterpoint where while the Ozaru form is very much primal and based on like anger, rage, all those primal emotions, Super Saiyan God requires much kind of a calmer focus to attain. I mean, 5 Saiyans literally have, at least the first time, until they decided, hey, let's just have it be a form they can use whenever because Dragonball.
Let's create a rainbow.
Yeah, and so there, at least when it was first introduced, it was a nice, interesting thing. It was like, okay, they actually literally have to focus all of their energy and granting their power to one Saiyan just so they can have a chance, not a guarantee, a chance at stopping Beerus from destroying their planet. And so, again, it serves as a nice counterpoint to what Saiyans are normally associated with, which is basically being forces of nature, driven by violence, by primal instinct, having to put that aside to attain power. It serves as a nice counterpoint to the Ozaru form, where it's a case of, okay, you have something that is like a very primal, reactive form, but then this one that requires a lot of intense mental focus, something that's kind of alluded to with the idea of Super Saiyan Blue, where instead of being motivated by anger, you have to kind of calm yourself down. You have to bring everything into focus. It's not as driven by emotion. It's driven more by, okay, I'm going to mentally focus my mind and attention on gaining this power, which kind of is a nice counterpoint to, well, the rest of the series that we had seen thus far, where it's usually screaming for 30 minutes and then they get another power up at the 11th hour.
We were definitely used to that formula and basically telling us that, no, you had to be peaceful, you had to be calm, you had to be serene.
And you had to
definitely something we'd never seen in Dragon Ball, and therefore we could have utilized that as
and it works best
as a new echelon.
And it works best in Battle of Gods than, well, in the rest of Super, because Battle of Gods, the film was very much Goku and Vegeta putting aside their respective pride for the sake of planet Earth. Vegeta literally having to sing the bingo song, doing everything he can, much to his own embarrassment, to keep Beerus from getting pissed off until, well, Majin Buu ruins everything.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's the one thing that I think is the biggest misstep of Super, or at least as far as I'm concerned to Vegeta's arc in Super, is that I really wish that ritual had not been messed with. I know that a lot of people like the idea that in the manga he eventually found a way to reach that on his own, and they've since fixed it a little bit and said, like, well, he wasn't really even able to sense God Ki until he was able to train with Whis. And so at that point, it still is a little bit of a swallowing of the pride, but that was what needed to happen considering the arc that goes on with Vegeta into Super. He has swallowed his pride. He's still a proud warrior, but he knows when he actually has to rely on someone else. And so that would have actually been a really great moment to say that he had to go through the ritual too, which meant he had to go ask Kakarot, the guy who is his rival, to please give him that level of power. I think that would have been a great thing for Vegeta to have. The other thing I also want to mention on that is I like the fact that you actually went with the Ozaru, because the bottom line is another transformation. If I had a third here, it would be Super Saiyan 4. Simply based on the fact that I love the connection, the subtle connection between the Ozaru and the Super Saiyan forms. And in my opinion, the best culmination of that is Super Saiyan 4, both in its appearance and also how you attain it. You have to go berserk, you have to hit that golden Ozaru to be able to reach that form, and then when you get it, it's like this perfect feral melding of the Ozaru form as well as your humanoid form. I've always loved how they try to do that. It's an amazing form as far as I'm concerned, as far as how they planned it out. So let's move on to the next question here. And the next question is, look, Goku is known for Dragon Ball, but you want to know what also is known in Dragon Ball? The villains. There's a lot of really great villains, and not just in Z. I know a lot of people know the 4 staple villains in Z, but when you go into Dragon Ball, there's already at least 4 others that you can go into that are just as menacing and just as much of a threat. Then you can add in Super and all of the villains that they've added with that. GT also had some very compelling villains that may have had some issues on execution, but still, if they had been fixed, would have been very legitimate threats to the Earth as well as to the universe. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and expand this into top 2 again, but your top 2 villains of the series, specifically the saga that goes on around them. For me, I mean, it goes without saying, you have to at least mention Frieza at some point, simply because he's probably the biggest threat that the Z Warriors have ever faced. And that's including aspects like the Red Ribbon Army. That the only aspect that I can compare is the Red Ribbon Army, because that was a legitimate armed force that Goku came in and dismantled, and it didn't happen again until Z, but now you had a galaxy-wide Red Ribbon Army. Now you had a lot of forces to be able to contend with. I wish we could have seen more of them. I wish there were more elite members aside from the Ginyu Force, but Frieza is the guy that's running them. And actually, one of the things I do like from Super Broly is they kind of tackle that issue, is that the Frieza forces were greatly diminished after all of these events happening, and so that's what they had available. So I do like Frieza, but I'm also going to say I would put one other person above him, and that is Cell. I like Frieza. I think he's absolutely despicable, and frankly, he's probably one of the more enjoyable things out of Super as well. Just seeing the arc that he actually went through. But to me, Cell, if you take the Frieza forces out of the equation for Frieza, Cell is the much more dominant threat. Why? Because he's basically everybody. He is Goku. He's Piccolo. He's Vegeta. He's even Frieza. He has the DNA of all of them, and he can use their techniques. I love his vampirism aspect as well. He is just a much more hideous villain compared to Frieza. I mean, Frieza's just got a dark soul. All right, that's fine, but without the army, I put Cell above him in that regard. I think Cell's much more of a threat. I think Cell knows he's much more of a threat. And therefore, it's much more enjoyable, at least as far as I'm concerned, to see Cell go down as opposed to Frieza. What about you, Romney? What are your top 2 villains of Dragon Ball?
Oof, it's also pretty tough. I guess the first one that comes to mind, because as much as I liked the Cell saga, there were some problems, at least in terms of the level of progression. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Android/Cell saga, a lot of the changes in villains and the structure was basically Toriyama's editor, not Ligma, changing on the fly. So, because the first androids, 19 and 20, were the initial ones he wanted to go with. The editor didn't like it, so he created 16, 17, and 18. The editor didn't like that, so he created the first form of Cell. Editor didn't like that, so he then created the second form. Yeah. The editor still didn't like it, so then he created Perfect Cell.
And by this point, Toriyama wanted to kill his editor.
Yeah. Which, that's pretty much the manga industry in a nutshell. So, in terms of, like, kind of how everything plays out, I would have to say Vegeta as the villain. Like, the Saiyan saga was probably a stronger saga because you have the level of buildup. You first have Raditz kind of give them the first taste, and then kind of this buildup of, hey, these 2 other Saiyans who are stronger than me are going to be here within the year. And you naturally have this buildup of, oh, well, crap, Goku's dead. Our strongest fighter is down. We need to prepare for these Saiyans. And it's because, okay, well, we can gather the Dragon Balls. He can train with King Kai. We'll be ready. But then as the Saiyans first arrive and you see all these established characters biting the dust one by one, whether by a Cyberman or by Nappa slamming them to wall or sacrifices that didn't pan out, and then ultimately culminating with the battle against Vegeta, who is a prince who thinks like, oh, this low-class warrior has no way of beating me, to be like, how the hell is this guy keeping up? And only then, ultimately, where Goku doesn't actually beat Vegeta. When you really think about it, it's basically pure luck, because he uses the Spirit Bomb. It does damage, but it's not enough to put him down. It was Vegeta's own pride that was his undoing. And so, in terms of how the saga is structured, I would say Vegeta is definitely up there in terms of as one of the best villains Goku has had to face.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, as for a second choice, it's hard to say. Like, just thinking back across pretty much the entirety of Dragon Ball, well, I'd have to say I would definitely have to put in, well, both King Piccolo and Piccolo Jr., because it has that same level of buildup where you have Goku first beating King Piccolo, who again establishes himself as like, hey, I'm just this omnipresent demon force that no one can stop. And he literally kills, like, first Tambourine kills Krillin, and then King Piccolo kills Master Roshi, who is the only one who knows the evil containment wave, and then literally kills Shenron when they're about to after he's made his wish to become youthful again, and then literally kills Shenron and makes it so that no one can use the Dragon Balls, only for then Goku to ultimately overpower him. But then you see the knockdown, drag-out fight that emerges with his fight against Piccolo Jr., where the arena is literally destroyed during the battle. Yeah. And how even after Goku literally beats Piccolo Jr. by shoulder ramming him out of sheer luck, how he ultimately has to stop Kami from killing Piccolo and by extension himself. It's just those... I mean, a lot of people think, oh, but they eventually became friends with Goku, so do they count? But I say they do, because those were cases where the buildup was there, the stakes were there. Those two arcs, the King Piccolo through Piccolo Jr. arc and the Saiyan saga, they have like that nice level of buildup that really both speak to Goku's character, but just kind of it does a good job of building tension and building the stakes.
Well, and also they also have really great arcs of being able to challenge Goku as a character. Because at that point, I think that's the first time. I'm actually kind of surprised that Goku didn't go Super Saiyan at that point, because he was in a maddening rage when he discovered Krillin's body.
True, but at the same time, when you consider the emotions Goku had with Krillin dying, he didn't watch Krillin get killed. He found Krillin dead after they had gone.
But what I'm saying, like, he was in a maddening rage. He was reckless. Like he almost cost himself his own life because of it.
I would just say, like, holding those side by side, you have one case where Goku finds Krillin already dead, whereas in the Frieza saga, Frieza literally kills Krillin in front of him. I can kind of see why the second moment probably pushed Goku more over the edge, because whereas he previously just found Krillin dead and was upset, Frieza specifically killed Krillin in front of him just to piss him off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because at that point, Frieza had just been annoyed with him, and he was just looking to play with his toys, kind of thing. And so at that point, it made a lot of sense. Shay, your top two villains of Dragon Ball.
My top two villains. Oh God, I was thinking about this long and hard, and I like all of your choices.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: there's a lot of awesome choices in Dragon Ball.
There is a lot. So for me, strangely enough, I actually really like Majin Buu and Kid Buu. I like them as villains.
In concept, they are frightening.
Yes. And I think the reason why was because Majin Buu looks the most innocent. Like, when you first see him, you're like, there's no way he's really that bad. And he just wanted, like, chocolate. And yes, he was turning everyone into chocolate. That's not a good thing.
He's basically was, like, what would happen if you gave, like, a 5-year-old brat superpowers.
Yes, that's literally what he is. So he was super innocent, but then when Kid Buu came into the picture and when Majin Buu showed his, like, true form, that's when you were like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. That's a lot. And as far as, like, my second favorite, I also really liked Frieza, because I think Frieza was, like, definitely the epitome of, like, an evil villain.
Yes.
When he first came in, he was definitely, like, the definition of an evil villain, because he was doing everything that you could think under the sun that an evil villain would do. And just like was mentioned, you know, he went and killed Krillin in front of Goku. Like, he was like, I know this is going to piss you off, so I'm going to do it anyway.
Yep. And
that to me is why I'm like, he was definitely, like, one of the best villains that I feel like.
And you're absolutely right. He is an epitome of evil. Like unlike with Cell, you can make an argument with Cell that Cell is basically selfish. He's Goku, but a villain. Like, he's only looking for that powerful fight to test his perfect body, whereas Frieza has been dominating the galaxy for I think at that point they said millennia. So, like, you already had a much better established villain there. That's why it's such a difficult pick for me, because as far as villain staples go, Frieza meets it, but Cell is just so much more malevolent to me than Frieza is. So I completely get you there. So we're actually running out of questions here, but I want to be able to at least hit these two, because another one that was listener requested, obviously, because kind of what brought this episode of the podcast about was the release of Dragon Ball Super Broly, and that is the movies. They are 50-50 at best, especially amongst the Dragon Ball community. Some want to just completely write off the movies entirely. They don't see them as helpful at all. I still have met Dragon Ball fans who are very content just to watch the series. They never touch the movies, and to me, I personally think they're missing out, but that's their choice. And so for that, I'm going to go ahead and say your best movie and your worst movie, because like I said, it's 50-50. There's a lot of crap in there too, and so I have a feeling we'll be making fun of Broly just as much as we might be praising Broly. All right, and for me, my best movie is I hate to do this, but it's a tie, and it's simply because of the development for the characters that they're going with. I love the Battle of the Gods simply for its development with Goku. I actually do like the fact that he had to go rely on others to be able to attain this power. I do like the fact that he hates the fact that he had to do it. I also love the fact that Beerus is just that compelling enough of a villain to test him a little bit further, and also be able to become a friend, and eventually much more than that into the Super Series. But up until that point, he wasn't necessarily just another despot looking to conquer the Earth. He was a god of destruction. Balance was his thing. So I thought that was always a compelling villain, and I love the Goku development that happens in Battle of Gods. But just as much as I like that, I've got to hand it to Dragon Ball Super Broly for its development of Vegeta, and actually fixing a lot of the continuity errors that happened with Vegeta during that time, and being able to establish Vegeta not only as the arrogant Prince of All Saiyans that we all know him to be, but also continuing to bolster his super arc, where he is very much a defender of Earth at this point because he has nowhere else to go. I especially love that Broly is basically a past mistake that comes back to haunt him that wasn't entirely his fault. This is something that I felt was missing from the original movie and gets expanded on by Toriyama in Dragon Ball Super Broly. And so at that point, I have to give it to both of them just simply because of the development that happened, not just with the villains in Beerus and Broly, but also with Goku and Vegeta as characters. As for my worst, I don't even need to think about it. Return of Cooler. So much stupid in that movie. So much stupid.
It's funny when the parody of Return of Cooler is better than the actual film itself. I mean,
oh jeez, it's at least watchable.
I mean, because I remember Kaiser Neko. Like, if you look at his behind the scenes, it's like, or he's just like, "Fuck this movie, fuck this movie, fuck this movie."
Well, but Kaiser's a hard thing to nail down, because the bottom line is that he's had that reaction to the original Broly. He's had that reaction to the original Cooler movie. He's not a fan of Slug, from what I understand. So at that point, like, he has all those reactions. But, I mean, for crying out loud, Kaiser, you made Return of Cooler better than the actual movie. Now it's tolerable. Now it's memeable. Now it's enjoyable. I have no love. Like, at least Cooler's Revenge has an interesting plot point. Frieza has a brother. Frieza now knows that the brother's dead and is going to come and kill Goku. He gets thwarted, and he finds the Borg for some weird reason. And then
the big spaghetti star.
Thank you, the big spaghetti star. And through that, he gets a whole new army to go to New Namek. Man, New Namek just can't catch a damn break.
Nope.
And I'm just sitting there going, okay, this is a really great sci-fi concept. And it's being done so shittily. Like, you have such potential, and you squandered it. Especially considering, I think this was the first movie that puts Vegeta as a Super Saiyan. And so at that point, like, this would have been a really great way to be able to introduce him, since Like he actually would know who Cooler was. Goku didn't know who Cooler was, but but Vegeta might have. So yeah, that's my worst. Return of Cooler, because here's the thing. There are a lot of bad Dragon Ball movies, but at least some of them are damn funny. All right? I know that some people will probably give me crap like, what about Super Android 13? No, that was hilarious, guys. That was absolutely hilarious. There is such memeable material in there that if you guys aren't seeing it, I don't know what to tell you. Broly is laughable at this point. Broly Second Coming has bad moments, but at least you get a good fight out of it. There are at least some things to admire. Return of Cooler has none of that. It is just, I don't know why it exists. All right, let's go ahead and start up with Shay, your best and worst Dragon Ball movie.
Best, I also have two. So for me, best, I do have to go with Battle of the Gods. Just because Beerus was such a good villain because he was so chill and it made him very likable. So you were kind of like, I like this villain. Like, I have no problem with him. Like, I don't want him to go away. I want him to stick around. Yeah. And you got that fabulous, fabulous song by Vegeta. So I was just like, you gotta love that song that Vegeta decides to sing. That is like, it was really funny, but also slightly cringeworthy to see him sing it. So that was definitely like one of my favorites, just because Beerus is such a likable villain, and you got a lot of ridiculous moments from Vegeta, and even where Vegeta's like legitimately scared, like not scared, but he knows what Beerus can do, so he's like trying to like kind of like appease him, like, I know what you can do, so I'm gonna cater to you just a little bit so you don't kill us all.
But at the same time, like he's getting pissed off at Beerus just as much as anybody else. After all, he hurt his Bulma.
Yes, he did. My second favorite one is also Super Broly. I really, really enjoyed that movie. And the main reason why I enjoyed it was, to me, you got a lot more from the smaller characters than you did from the original Broly. So like you got more insight. To me, it made Bardock a much more likable character, because before I didn't really like Bardock, but then from Super Broly I started to like him a little bit more, even though he was like a smaller role. But it was like he actually really did love his son. Like he actually truly loved Goku, whereas before you got this idea that he hated his son and like didn't care about him.
See, I'm always torn because I like the original Bardock because it was funny. Yeah. Your hero was a bad guy. He was a legitimately bad guy. And so I love that aspect of it. But then I have complaints with Broly's Bardock, but he's much better written as far as I'm concerned. He's probably like the smartest Saiyan they showcased in that entire damn thing.
And they didn't have to give him the ability to see the future in order to do it.
Exactly. They just they gave him the power of common sense.
Thank you. And I also like that you got to like actually see who Goku's mom was, because that was one of the things that was like so many of the unanswered questions of like, who is Goku's mom? And you saw who she was. I believe you heard her name as well. And so that was like a good answered question for fans.
Yeah, it's one of those answers that happened in the manga that a lot of people just kind of ignored. Mainly because I don't think Minus ever came here, did it?
It did, but here's why most people didn't read it. It's because it was in Jocko the Galactic Patrolman, which you didn't realize until you had read it that it was connected to Dragon Ball, because it was just, this is just a new series Toriyama is doing. But then at the end of Jocko Galactic Patrolman, that's when it's like, this takes place in the same universe. The thing that Jocko was supposed to look out for was the arrival of Goku's pod, but because he had to go to the bathroom, he basically didn't see the ship land on Earth.
Oh, Toriyama. Wow. You always have to lace comedy with serious.
And then I also liked Broly. Super Broly was because you felt more for Broly in this one than you did in the original Broly.
Yep.
In the original Broly, he literally came in not like as a villain, but he literally said mostly one word the entire time, and that was Kakarot. So you really just knew he just had some weird issue with Goku the entire time. Whereas in Super Broly, he actually had more lines, and you actually felt bad for him. Like, you're like, I really feel bad for you. I know you're a bad guy, but I feel bad for you. The fact that you're on this planet by yourself and you've like had to like survive, like that, I just kind of felt bad about. So that's why I made it like
can we
one
just,
of the better movies.
Can we just say that like this is another moment where Team 4-Star figured it out so well and illustrated it so well in their movies? Because in the Broly movie, I think it's perfect from Paragus. He hates Kakarot because he cried a lot for like 3 hours. And it's just like, dude, that's exactly the problem here.
Literally. And then my worst Dragon Ball Z movie or Dragon Ball movie is it's probably Bio Broly, because I was kind of like, just let him stay dead at this point.
Yeah,
I was
Second
like,
Coming was
when
enough.
I heard about Second Coming was cool. Like, I was like, okay, I can watch this. Like, I can see a villain making a reemergence for a second time. Great, they're not yet dead. They come back again. But then Bio Broly came out, and I'm like, he's just not even a person at this point. He's goo. Like,
It's barely Broly. I mean, if you didn't even call it Bio Broly, the film would make as much sense.
Let's be real. Bio Broly was basically Ditto. He was Ditto, and you were like, he's just a goo. Like, what do we do?
Oh
That's literally what he was. He was Ditto, and then still all he said was Kakarot the entire time.
Yeah. Which
That's all
at
he
that
said.
point, question: how would he know what that word meant? He's a clone. How would he know?
I don't remember if Goku was even in
not.
Bio Broly.
He was only there at like
kids,
the end. Yeah,
it was like it was Kid Trunks and Goten. I'm like,
the focuses of Bio Broly are 18, Mr. Satan, or Hercule, and Kid Trunks and Goten. That's it.
Yeah. And I'm like, Goku's nowhere there, and you're screaming Kakarot over and over again. Like,
exactly.
Great.
and here's the thing. I get a lot of people's argument that like, oh cool, we got 18 development in this movie. Did you really though? Did you really? You got Majin Buu development. She hasn't changed since the Buu arc.
No, Bio Broly it's forgettable.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of forget about it until someone like brings it up, and you're like, wait, yeah, you're right. There was a third Broly movie.
Unless, of course, you bring up the fact that Frieza had a brother and.
Yeah.
Then you start having that problem too. All right, Romney, your best and worst Dragon Ball movie.
Well, I'm gonna get the worst out of the way since Shay beat me to it. Bio Broly. I mean, like I mentioned, if you didn't call the film Bio Broly, if you gave it like a completely different title, the story would have made just as much sense, because it's like cells of Broly into this goop monster thing, and I'm just like, okay, if you took out that detail, what changes? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Could have just have it be. It was basically a retread of World's Strongest, except without Dr. Wheelo.
Pretty much.
Just instead of Dr. Wheelo, you had a different mad scientist creating a different clone monster.
Well, let's just be honest. World's Strongest was better.
Yeah, much better. It's just, I look at that and I'm just like, this Broly's like barely in it, if at all. Honestly, when Goku said like, "Oh, Broly's rampaging in the afterlife," and it's like, is rampaging in this parts of the afterlife? I better go summon him. I'm just like, why was that not the movie? Why aren't we?
And that would have been that would have been a much better movie.
Much cooler movie.
Yeah, but no, we just basically got Kid Trunks and Goten fighting Swamp Thing, and not even a good version of Swamp Thing.
Then at one point they like pee on him or something. Like, it was really like.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember that part of.
That's the problem with Kid Trunks and Goten is that you don't have legitimate fights. You have gag moments.
Yeah, not that there's any. If you're setting out to do gag moments, that's fine.
No, that's fine. It's a nod to the original Dragon Ball, and that's fine and dandy. But the bottom line is that, I mean, I already did have the P moment in. No, it wasn't World's Strongest. What was it?
It was
Dead Zone. Dead Zone. That's probably the funniest P moment that the Dragon Ball movies have ever provided.
Yeah, and so
Bio
Broly is like the worst. At least that's like the one Dragon Ball movie I saw that I'm just like, what the hell was this?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't deserve to exist. Like, it doesn't make sense why it exists. In fact, Romney needs to go rewrite that script for Broly terrorizing the afterlife, because that at least would have been a legacy to be.
Well, yeah,
able
the
to
challenge
do.
is the challenge isn't so much writing it; it's getting enough people to animate the thing. That's the challenge. Because I'm sure if I got the resources, I'm sure I could probably get Masako X to actually voice Goku. I'm sure I could get people to voice it. It's the animation where it'd be the struggle, and well, Toei releasing the Hounds.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
All right.
So for the best Dragon Ball movies, I'm kind of going to separate it into tiers because you both have already mentioned Battle of Gods and Super Broly. And as much as I enjoy those movies, I don't really have anything else to contribute beyond what's already been said. So I'm going to kind of separate it out. I'm going to kind of give it more or less a two-way tie here. But I'm separating out one that's a Dragon Ball movie and one that's specifically Z. And so the one that's Z that I would consider probably the best, well, that would have to be History of Trunks. Just given kind of the emotions behind it, what we learned about his character, that one I would consider as one of the best Z movies would be History of Trunks. As for Dragon Ball, well, there's one that I consider my favorite, and then one that I would just recommend to anyone who's only seen Z, hasn't seen Dragon Ball, but this movie would be a good recommendation. So the one that's my personal favorite is Mystical Adventure, where it's kind of a loose retelling of the first World Martial Arts Tournament. Goku and Krillin.
Is that one the movie where they actually did get Bulma's hair right?
No, that's the other one I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
And so this one was basically a loose retelling. Goku and Krillin finish training under Master Roshi. They go to compete at the tournament. For some reason, Chaozu is an emperor this time, which I thought was weird, but I just rolled with it because it was a case of, okay, well, we'll just roll with it because I didn't know who Chaozu really was at the time until seeing the main anime later. But at least there, it's a nice self-contained story. It's like, okay, it's a world martial arts tournament. You see kind of these weird reinterpretations of the Crane School, particularly Mercenary Tao. And then you just kind of have where they're fighting and they're trying to find the Dragon Balls. And then ultimately they give the Dragon Balls to the little kid. Like, I don't remember the kid or his father's name, but like the big Native American guy.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, but basically, like, after all of this is said and done, Goku and Krillin give the Dragon Balls to the young kid whose father was killed by Mercenary Tao during the tournament, and that's how they bring him back to life. It's like, oh yeah, we'll use the Dragon Balls to bring this guy back to life because, well, you lost the most during all of this. And so that's my personal favorite of the Dragon Ball movies is Mystical Adventure. As for the one I would recommend that if you've only seen Z and you just want at least kind of a Cliff's Notes version of Dragon Ball, that would have to be Path to Power. That was the Dragon Ball movie, though. That's the one where they got Bulma's hair color right. Yeah. But that was a Dragon Ball movie using the Z-style character designs. It was released shortly around the conclusion of GT to kind of mark another anniversary. And so if you kind of want a glimpse of the original Dragon Ball, but done in a style reminiscent of Z, I highly recommend Dragon Ball Path to Power, where it basically recaps Bulma and Goku's first meeting and kind of goes all the way through the Red Ribbon Army Saga, where it kind of skips Pilaf and all the other stuff, and it just goes from Bulma and Goku meeting to Goku taking out the Red Ribbon Army in a way that's, again, a nice, almost a celebration of what Dragon Ball had become at that point.
But at the same time, also highlighting what came... You basically have kind of pointed this out. Like, it looks like Z, but it's highlighting Dragon Ball villains. So it's highlighting... So I actually love the picks that you have there because the Crane School is actually a really cool thing that was implemented in the original Dragon Ball, and a lot of people don't necessarily know that. In fact, the problem is if you could cut out a lot of villains, Tao would be up there. I like Tao Pai Pai, and what they actually tried to do with him as a legitimate threat in the Dragon Ball universe. It's just, unfortunately, King Piccolo then happened, and he was a much bigger threat, and then bigger threats followed.
Yeah.
And I especially love those movies because they took two different arcs in Dragon Ball and highlighted them.
Yeah, and found a way to make them into nice, self-contained stories because that's kind of the difference between Battle of Gods and Super and then these earlier movies, because these earlier movies were, hey, let's just take these characters people like and just tell a cool story with them. They weren't trying to be part of a large, elaborate canon. It's like, hey, we know this story isn't canon. We're just taking these characters, doing something cool with them. We hope you enjoy it. Instead of now where it's like, oh, well, these movies now have to fit into this new canon. And so that's kind of what I like about the older Dragon Ball movies is that they got to have a little bit of fun with it. It's like, yeah, we know this isn't canon. Yeah, we know that this is going to raise more questions. But hey, we wanted to do some really cool stuff with these beloved characters.
All right. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time. But there's at least one other question that I want to take on, which I try to end every Why We Geek podcast on, which is basically where do we see the discussion we're having moving forward. So in this case, where do we see Dragon Ball moving forward? We currently have Dragon Ball Superheroes that's happening and is being released out here slowly because I don't know if this is actually going to get a dub or not from Funimation. And there's also rumblings that after the Broly movie, there is talk of Super's second part happening fairly soon, and it's starting basically with, unfortunately, another movie arc, as it's going to retell Broly, but be able to make it work within the context of Super as an anime. So at that point, we already have a couple of things that are being speculated upon, but what specifically would you guys like to see happen with Dragon Ball moving forward? I personally have no problem with Super moving forward. My problems with Super are I don't want to say minor. They definitely can hold it down, but it looks to me like they're actually starting to fix that, especially with the Broly movie. If I were to say one thing I would like to see happen in that series, though, please do something with Gohan. The guy has been getting the shaft for years. And I've seen so many people sit there and go, well, he's married. He has a kid. You can't tell a good story with people who are married and have kids. I beg to disagree. And I think Gohan might be your perfect example. To me, Gohan has gotten the shaft since Cell. Even Boo, to some extent, shafts him. And so at that point, I'd really love for them to be able to fix this one mistake that I think Toriyama has made for many years and fix Gohan. Like, give him a legitimate reason for people to care about him, especially considering that a lot of people are wanting Super simply because they want to see Pan grow up. And they want to also kind of fix the problems that GT had with Pan as well. Like, let her actually become a Super Saiyan kind of thing. But here's the thing. You can't do that until you fix Gohan! Because the dad has to want to teach her Super Saiyan! Just saying, people. Please fix Gohan. # fix Gohan. Shay, you were already erupting, so I have a feeling Gohan's something that you would want as well, or at least Pan is something you would want as well.
Pan is the biggest one for me. I've been wanting a female Super Saiyan for so long.
Well, you have them.
Like
Caulifla. Kale.
True.
And that summarizes it perfectly.
Let's just be honest. We want Pan to hit.
Yes. Yes. Because I know at one point, like, it was argued, I guess, Toriyama came forward and said that he never made a female Super Saiyan because he didn't know how to draw one, I guess. Like, he didn't know how to draw a female Super Saiyan, so that was why it was never put into context. So, like, a lot of people were like, we want one.
And to elaborate on that, a lot of it is that Toriyama's gone on record saying that he's not good at writing female characters. That's kind of why he basically wrote Chi-Chi out of the plot after reintroducing her when Goku had grown up. It's because he just didn't know what to do. By his own admission, it's like, hey, I'm not really good at writing female characters. I'm not good at it.
And he's also admitted in the past numerous times, like especially with characters like Yamcha, where he just kind of sits there and goes, I don't know what else to do with them, and so he writes them basically.
Or he just basically straight up forgets they exist, like poor Launch.
Launch.
But yes, I agree. I want Pan to become a Super Saiyan.
I agree.
Really bad. I've always wanted that, especially when they showed that Gohan had a daughter, like way back in like Dragon Ball Z when they revealed that. My first thing was like, oh, cool, we're gonna see a female Super Saiyan. We're gonna see Pan. We're gonna see if Pan has the ability to become a Super Saiyan. And
but yet we missed the opportunity of Bra.
I know.
Bulma's temper, but a Super Saiyan?
But I never felt her becoming a Super Saiyan for some reason because of the fact that she was just so... She wasn't... Like, Pan was, like, always in the thick of stuff. Like, she was a total tomboy, so she was, like, in everything.
Yeah. No, there's a definite difference between Pan
Bray
and
was
Bra.
like Bra was so, not that there's a problem with being girly, but she was very, very girly. So like I never saw her becoming a Super Saiyan ever. And if she did, I would be shocked. So I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if she became one, but I'd be super, super shocked. Like I'd be like, whoa.
That's why I'm saying it's a missed opportunity. Bulma's temper, but in a much more powerful body?
Yeah,
how has this not happened?
I mean, I could kind of even see the storytelling potential of it, because, again, Shay brought up a good point. Like, Pan very much liked to fight, very much a tomboy, whereas Bra was more of a girly girl. If they actually decide to go that far, I can kind of see the story playing out this way, where maybe something happens while Bulla is out and about, and, like, maybe just something gets her angry. It could be something, you could go the dramatic route or the comedic route, where she suddenly turns Super Saiyan, and unlike Pan, who had been fighting and had been training with Goku, like, even around the times of the last episode of Z, you basically have someone who has no combat experience suddenly, like, it would basically almost be like a smaller version of the Ozaru form, where you have someone who has had no training suddenly going Super Saiyan and not knowing how to control it. And I can see the story arc from that being Vegeta having to suddenly teach his daughter how to control this power that she is not used to. Like, that's something I would want to see. If they decide to go that route, that would be the direction I would take it as. Okay, have Bra go Super Saiyan, not realizing what's going on, and Vegeta having to kind of coach her through controlling her strength, which, again, something that Vegeta himself had to learn the hard way.
Well,
thank you. Yeah,
this is definitely something that I'm very interested to see what Super does with it, because obviously now we have her as Bulla. So at that point, like, I know a lot of people who are basically screaming that GT is no longer canon simply because Bra's now Bulla. Like, a lot of people are just assuming that Bulla is Bra around that time. And so at that point, I mean, I get the argument, and if that's the case, then that's the way it goes. But there's a lot of potential to be able to tell there. There's also tons of potential for Pan.
I feel like, though, if they do it, I don't want them to do it to just like satisfy like us as fans. Like, if you're gonna do it, please do it right. Like, do it so that the fans are happy about it. And I feel like also because, like, even though, you know, Dragon Ball Z has always been like a total like boy anime for like a lot of girls like who grew up watching anime, it was like very geared towards boys, but so many girls like grew up watching it. And so like to see like a female character go Super Saiyan would be very, very satisfying to see. But if they do it, just do it right. Just write it well. Like, please do it justice, and not just to say, hey, look, we did it, and then just throw it at us, because we're gonna be like,
basically
what?
like they did with Kale and Caulifla.
See, here's the thing, is that Kale and Caulifla to me give hope, because then at that point it actually got Toriyama to consider that concept. And to see, like, okay, well, you know, I can't necessarily do it with the characters that I've already written into a corner. Let's start with a blank slate. Let's actually create a character. We'll make them go Super Saiyan, and we'll just base them in another universe, because obviously all the Saiyans are dead. And so at that point, Kale and Caulifla gave me hope, because I literally looked at them and went, oh, now we can actually look at this again. We can look at the possibility of making Pan a Super Saiyan and giving her a legitimate shot at this, but also being able to give a bunch of other badass female Saiyans that we can all rally behind. I also want to say that Kale gave me a little bit of hope, because here's the thing. I wasn't really on board with Broly up until the new movie, but I like the idea of a Super Saiyan who couldn't control his powers. Like an unstable Saiyan, a Berserker Saiyan. And so at that point, Kale had that double that double point for me, where not only was it a female Saiyan becoming a Super Saiyan, but also that she couldn't control her powers. And I've always thought that would be a really great thing to be able to go into, again, because you have the Ozaru fueling it, and the Ozaru is in essence a chaotic element. So I really do actually love the potential that comes from that aspect. I'm just saying, though, please fix Gohan so he can teach her. It would be an awesome... Look, it would be a great moment for Goku to teach her. It would be so much more powerful for Gohan to teach her.
Well, and at the same time, it could... At the same time, another potential story thing could be even almost a clash between Goku and Gohan over what you could almost kind of see a revisiting of how Chi-Chi wanted to raise Gohan to be a scholar, to not be a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I can see kind of that disagreement rearing its head again, where Goku is wanting to kind of encourage fans, like, hey, yeah, she clearly is has talent as a fighter, but I can see Gohan kind of being on the opposite route of, hey, I don't want you to do to her what you did to me when
That's
facing
exactly
a Cell.
why I want it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you're saying that there's potential. I want it. I want to actually have that moment, because here's the thing. I think that Chi-Chi is one of those few characters that could be written out of the corner for Toriyama. And a lot of the reasons she was written in the corner is she is as stubborn as an ox. That's appropriate considering King Ox. But you could literally have that confrontation moment and then pull Chi-Chi out of that corner, and she realizes she has some stuff to learn too. And you immediately bring her back out into it, and you can do something with her via Goten.
Yeah, and it could kind of go either way, because it would depend on whether Gohan is the overprotective father, kind of wanting to keep her safe, or if he kind of goes the route kind of if he kind of becomes the in-between between Goku and Chi-Chi, where Chi-Chi wanted to go full scholar, Goku being more like, hey, full fighter. I can either see Gohan emulating Chi-Chi, or I can even see him being the middle ground of being like, hey, I don't want to force either decision onto her, let Pan grow up and decide for herself, because I can see it going either way. There's story potential there. There's something there's something there that can be explored.
Yeah, I could also see it being another potential of another Goku and Vegeta situation. So let's say they do have Bulla go Super Saiyan, and let's say she does it before Pan does it, and then Pan's like, I have to hurry up and try and find a way to become Super Saiyan because Bulla was able to do it. So it's I could see that being just like how it was when Goku went Super Saiyan and Vegeta could not go Super Saiyan, and he was on that track to I need to become Super Saiyan so I can beat Goku. And it could be the same thing with Pan and Bulla, but just reverse.
I also want to bring this up because our live chat actually did bring up another interesting point that you could go with it, which is, isn't Pan only a quarter Saiyan? Isn't that not enough to go Super Saiyan? Wouldn't that be another interesting story concept to be able to do, that she tries and she fails? And now she has to live with the fact she's the only one amongst the Saiyans that can't?
True. But everyone also thought her mom wouldn't be able to fly. And then her mom was able to, and
but
she's
I'm saying, there are other ways to be
human.
able to give characters power, and so at that point you could make Pan that way. And I would actually make the argument GT did that by basically, you could make the argument that she was a teenager at that point. If she hadn't figured out a way to unlock Super Saiyan when Goten could do it at 6-7 years old, she probably couldn't. And so you could make an argument that there's a story to tell there. She has to live with the resentment of not being able to do what her grandpa does so well, and learning to live with that.
Or have her go evil and trying to somehow try.
We can't do that because they would be the most productive villains ever.
Well, yeah, or I could even see going the route of maybe not turning Super Saiyan the way we know it, but kind of basically in typical shonen manga fashion, coming up with some sort of different power-up that allows her to get that similar power boost, but in a different way. I could see maybe something that's a callback to Mystic Gohan. Okay, well, Gohan was made Mystic and got these power-ups from the Elder Kais
the Mystic element.
Before marrying Videl. And so it's okay, well, what if some of that power from Gohan getting the boost from the Elder Kais was passed on to Pan? That could be another way you could go. It's okay, she's able to maybe tap into that side of the power spectrum.
Or another thing that's being brought up in our live chat, what if instead of being tapped into the key that they know so well, what if she was more finely tuned into God Ki? And turning Super Saiyan God was stupid easy for her instead. That would be an interesting turn.
It would make sense since that was kind of played into Battle of the Gods as well.
Yeah, but then you could have the potential for her being able to, I don't know, be the conduit to teach Goku how to control Ultra Instinct. Maybe she figures out how to do it.
Maybe.
There's lots of ways that this could go.
Yeah, and there's one thing that we kind of forgot to mention here is that although the anime of Super has concluded, the manga has still been going. They've already kind of started a whole new arc beyond the Broly arc in the manga. And the other factor is that it's no longer just Toriyama telling the story. Toyotaro has been kind of helping to guide things along. He was the one who pushed for Kale and Khalifa. He was the one who pushed for some of the Universe 6, some of the other universes, and those designs. Although Toriyama is still kind of guiding the story, it's no longer just him coming up with it.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong. Most of Universe 6 is his idea, isn't it?
Well, yeah, like I know, like Universe 6, but even just the designs of a lot of the other Gods of Destruction for the Tournament of Power were Toyotaro's ideas.
Yeah.
And some people even argue that Goku's fight against Jiren was basically him recycling an idea from Dragon Ball AF, just reworking it within the sandbox Toriyama laid out. And that's the other factor to consider, is that we're almost kind of seeing a case where it's not just Toriyama crafting the story anymore. You've got the powers that be at Toei, but then you've also got Toyotaro, who kind of helped fix some of the problems with things like the Future Trunks arc in the Super manga. And again, Geekdom 101 goes into detail where Toriyama kind of just gives bullet points over how he wants arcs to play out. And the people at Toei making the anime think, okay, well, we've got these bullet points to hit, so let's write the scripts, flesh out these episodes, and kind of go along following this set of bullet points. And then those same bullet points are given to Toyotaro. And although they're both following the same bullet points, looking at the Future Trunks arc and Goku Black arc specifically, you can see that although they followed the same bullet points, they came up with radically different versions of that saga.
Yeah, exactly. There's tons of discussion that we could literally have on all of this stuff. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So that's one of the things that I love about this podcast, is that I can eventually bring this back and we can actually have some of these discussions and be able to say, okay, well, now that Toyotaro is running things, how could we actually make some of these ideas work out? But unfortunately, we've got to wrap up for this evening because it's already getting late and I already know that I've got kids that I've probably got to put to bed at this point. So, first of all, I want to thank my panel for joining me discussing Dragon Ball tonight. It's actually been an amazing thing considering, especially this year, a lot of the shroud that's kind of happened around Dragon Ball inadvertently. Unfortunately, the franchise is kind of lumped into it, and there's not really much that can be controlled with it. But at least we were able to come together as three geeks and be able to explain why Dragon Ball is still an awesome thing and why ideas can still be done and made even more amazing now that we have more avenues to be able to go through. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up. If people want to be able to reach out to us and be able to ask our opinions on maybe your theories about Dragon Ball, or maybe you're mad that World's Strongest didn't really get a spotlight in the movie question, and you want to ask our actual opinions on World's Strongest, Shay Taree, how do people get a hold of you to do that?
Oh, the best way to get a hold of me is either on Twitter, which is my handle is Shay_Taree on Twitter. Also on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Shay Taree, all one word. And I'm also a part of another podcast as well called the Otaku Fix. There you can find them on YouTube as well. I'm on that podcast usually about twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. And also, I will go ahead and point everybody also to Shay's channel, because one of the things that I've already enjoyed a lot about Shay's channel is her Motivational Monday segment, but I've also been getting into kind of her open-ended debate segments as well. Specifically, she just barely did a video on unpopular anime opinions, and I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this right here and now. I think that might be making its way to Why We Geek. Safe to spoil that, Shay?
Yes, it is safe to spoil that.
Safe to spoil that. So go and check out her unpopular anime, or at least her viewpoint on unpopular anime opinions. Stephen Romney, how do people get a hold of your content?
Well, if you're wanting to watch the backlog of videos I have so far, you can find me on YouTube and on Facebook under my handle Studio Ghost Utah. I upload to both when I actually have something to upload. Right now, I'm kind of on a bit of a hiatus while I kind of get my personal life in order. But if you want to interact with me directly, the other places you can find me are on Twitter @RomneyReviews, which if you want to send me suggestions or send me anything you want me to respond to specifically, seriously, Adam has 2 kids. He's not my secretary. You can talk to me, people. I won't bite, not even if you ask me to, because I'm not into that. You can find me on Twitter at Romney Reviews, and I also post to Instagram at Romney Does Art, where I post pictures of cats, food that I cook, random Nintendo video game tidbits, and more cats.
I mean, my Instagram is pretty much my kids, so I can't necessarily say I do it better.
Yeah, mine is just like me and like my life. Oh, and lots of Disney pictures because I go to Disney.
Lots of Disney pictures, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
just
as
for
my
me,
wife
it's
pointed out, a lot of your boyfriend, which she's like,
it is a lot.
Is that supposed to be her boyfriend? I'm like, I guess so.
That is my boyfriend in my Instagram pictures. We hang out a lot and do geeky stuff together.
Yeah, it's
And
just
my
the
wife
difference
enjoys
is that my handle on Instagram is kind of a lie because I opened it saying Romney Does Art, and I've yet to actually do much art on it.
That's all right. All right, if you guys want to reach out to me, the best places to be able to do so, first of all, are on Twitter at Drak2326 on there. That's probably the best place if you want to be able to reach out to me, say about being on the Why We Geek podcast itself. You can do so there and be able to reach out to me. I think I've got DMs activated. If not, I'll reach out to you or let me know in the comments below, and I'll get that fixed for you. But that's the best place to be able to reach me on Twitter. You can also follow me on Instagram at Drak2326, and like I said, you're pretty much going to be following a family album. Not going to lie, I occasionally get into geeky stuff there, but really the kids get kind of highlighted there. And of course, if you want to be able to support the podcast, which we strongly encourage that you guys do, I know that we got some new people in for the live stream. The first thing that we would ask is you support the RSS feed, which has changed. We are now going under whywegeek.libsyn.com. We've had to transition over just to get some more perks, some more benefits, and open up to a whole new market. So that's where you can get access to the podcast, also a bigger archive that we can work with so I don't actually have to delete episodes. I really don't want to do that with Why We Geek. That's just kind of my deal. So you can get access to that on whywegeek.libsyn.com, or you can look up the Why We Geek podcast on iTunes. We're still having some issues with Google Play, but we'll get those figured out in the next little bit. Also, you can support the podcast on Twitter at Why We Geek. Unfortunately, we don't have a Facebook page yet, but we're working on that as well, so that'll be happening very soon. And I'm also just going to go ahead and let people know in advance that there might be a podcast update happening on the YouTube channel, just explaining some of the things that might be happening in the future, not just for Why We Geek, but also for the other two podcasts that I do as well. So you guys want to be able to pay attention to that. But that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. So first of all, once again, I want to thank my panel for joining me and talking about Dragon Ball and enjoying in all the geeky discussions that can happen therein. I want to thank personally the live chat that we were able to get. Thank you guys for stopping by and being able to provide great opinions toward that hadn't necessarily been considered with Dragon Ball. And of course, we will be back next time for even more Why We Geek. So for me, for Romney, and for Shay, we'll see you guys next time.